But just to be clear, you would agree that if I did that, that was demonstrating that I, as the...
Bro, the debate sophistry, man, is so irritating. You would agree. You would agree. You would agree. Get over it, Stylo. I've already given you a W. Yes, you were right and I was wrong. What more do you want me to say? What more do you want me to say? You were right. I was being too gracious to him. So he's literally arguing him with the... Dude, this is so obnoxious. He's arguing with him with the edit. That is outrageous. That is like outrageous conduct. If you've got like notes that you need to read off, you are not equipped to do a debate about this. Like you need to internalize and know this shit to have a debate.
Sorry, do you know what informed consent means?
But no, now you're backtracking. Again, this
well, just tell me, yes or no, do you know what informed consent means?
Jesse, specifically, when it comes to how they...
Yeah, the DSM-5 lists gender dysphoria as a mental illness, yeah.
So in the DSM-5, gender dysphoria is listed as a mental disorder.
Yeah, that means mental illness, you retard.
Okay, do you think gender dysphoria is listed in the DSM-5 as a mental disorder?
Experiencing gender dysphoria is.
What?
Yes. Yeah, I think we...
What the fuck, dude? Lance from TheSerfs. Lance from TheSerfs is like a lefty streamer who, back in the day when I was a tiny creator, he used to raid me actually. I always used to enjoy getting a little Surfs raid when I was a 30 viewer Andy. 200 viewers coming in. Brilliant. But now, as with many of these lefties, I have surpassed them intellectually and viewership wise. Anyway. I'm only fucking around. Anyway. Lance has got a reputation for being a terrible debater. And he's had a number of debates where he has performed terribly and done very badly. The most recent one that I watched was when he was on Tim Pool and he was making utterly deranged arguments about abortion. And like conceding things he didn't need to concede about like abortions up to term. Like seemingly totally misunderstanding how birthing works. And that, you know, you don't need to abort a fetus that's 9 months pregnant. You can just induce birth, let the baby come out, and then that's sorted, you know? It was very deranged what he was arguing for. Very deranged. Anyway, there is now a new debate that he has done about a topic that I know many of you hold dear to your hearts, and that is trans issues. Now, the person that he has debated is someone called Jesse Singal. Okay? Now, Jesse, for those of you that don't know, is someone that has been a very staunch critic of like youth trans medicine stuff. So he's been very critical of like puberty blockers. He's been critical of the science around it. He's not actually really like transphobic. He's quite respectful. He believes that trans people are a thing, and he believes they should be treated well and not be. You shouldn't be mean to them. You shouldn't misgender them. All this sort of thing, right? But lefties can't stand the fact that he's not just completely singing from the same hymn sheet, and he's got these, what I consider to be very legitimate, fair criticisms of some of the trans issues, particularly around the kind of the youth healthcare stuff, right? Okay. So in any case, this Jesse guy is extremely knowledgeable in regards to you know, this topic. He's read loads of studies, loads of information about it. You know, he is very well read, very well researched. And so Lance thought, you know what? I'm going to debate this guy. Okay? Now, I don't want to poison the well too much. Okay? But I mean, you know, I think you all know what's going to happen in this debate anyway. I'll try and be fair when I'm watching it. Okay? But Jesus Christ, you know what's going to happen. My first kind of like thought process when I saw this is, because I obviously wanted to watch it on stream. I thought, I wonder what the comments are like. Now, bear in mind, this is Lance's channel, okay? So this is Lance's YouTube channel, TheSerftimes, right? And these are comments from, presumably, what would be like his community or his audience. The first one reads, Jesus, why would you even upload this? I don't understand why after the Lawrence 7 debate, this guy still believes he can debate. This has to be a humiliation fetish. Oof. This seems like a public self-flagellation by Lance. Oh, okay. Well, I don't want to poison the well here, so let's not read any more. But I think it gives quite an interesting tonal perspective on what might be happening here, hey? Ouch. Ouch indeed. Ouch indeed. Now, credit to Lance. I do think it's commendable that he decided to upload it, even though it seems that it went quite badly for him. But who knows? Maybe these people are just bigoted right-wing transphobes. Maybe Lance did really well. I will speed this up a bit, because, dude, it's fucking 4:15 already. But let's get into this, guys. Let's see how he does. Let's have a listen to the Jesse Singal debates.
Hey everybody, I've got the Jesse Singal debate coming up right away, but if you don't want to listen to the preamble, and I completely understand, you can click on this point in the time code. I just want to clear up a couple things. I was originally going to upload this debate on Monday, right after it took place, but Jesse actually asked me if I would wait until Thursday, which is why you see in social media posts me saying certain things like, hey, the debate will be up on YouTube on Thursday, that kind of stuff. And then I just recently found out that he went ahead and uploaded it anyway. So, I mean, here we are. And in addition to that, I noticed that he also, in his, introduction on the podcast episode, talks about how in the Zoom version, like he recorded the Zoom call and put a link to the Zoom call, I guess, in the description. There might be a part at the very end of the debate that can confuse some people, so I wanted to clear that up right away.
Bro, the thing is, I mean, maybe I'm just got some latent bias from in the early days. This guy being, decent to me, at least. I don't think Lance is like a particular malicious or bad person, right? He's just, I think he's got some politics that are very retarded. Don't get me wrong. He's a snake. Is he a snake? I don't know if I classify him as a snake necessarily. Like, I don't think he's like a terrible person. You're coping like shit. Okay. Listen, I could be being biased. I could be being biased because, I do have warm memories of years gone past with this guy. How is he malicious? I just characterize it more as stupidity or retardation than him being like a super malicious person. He's willing to lie where it's expedient. Okay. For whatever argument he's given. So you think he lied? Well, sure. Okay, I could see that. Yeah, okay. Dude, the thing is, you might think I'm coping with this, and that's fine. I'm willing to accept that, okay? I feel like his lies are a product of wanting to do the right thing from his own perspective. Like he wants to help out minorities or something. Like, this is a problem that you have with some progressives, is they're unwilling to tell uncomfortable truths. So they'll just cope and lie about it and be dishonest, Just start the debate. No. In fact, I'm going to ban you for making that comment because it's mildly irritating. Okay, chat's moving too fast. If I remember, I'll do it.
I found out that Jesse wanted to debate me and had actually been trying to entice me using the Palestinian Children's Relief Fund as, I guess, some kind of you wouldn't turn down this valuable charity, would you? Which...
Hey man, never heard back from you about this. Do you not think PCRF is a worthy charity? Dude, hang on a second. Hang on a sec. The point is you are talking a lot of shit. You are talking a lot of shit about this guy, right? And you are calling him all this transphobic, bigot, all this stuff. So he wants a chance to have a conversation. And so he's using this, obviously, as a sort of a carrot, if you like. I don't really have a problem with that. Because it's well, you're talking all this mad shit about him, calling him all these names and calling him a bigot and shit, when I don't think he's a bigot at all. So, of course, he's trying to, tempt you with this. And he's obviously trying to play a bit of a game here. But it's fair enough. You say all this crazy shit about him.
To be honest, I found kind of gross, so I emailed him to the effect of, I've wanted to debate Jesse Singal for a really long time. You don't need terms and conditions. I mean, if you want to donate money to a worthwhile charity, that's entirely up to you. But in the meantime, yeah, I have absolutely no problem coming onto your show. I just simply wasn't aware that you'd been posting on Blue Sky. It's just one of those things, the minute I found out, I, looked up his email and immediately contacted him. And that's where I thought that was going to be. But then at the very end of the debate, he ended up bringing that up and saying, so per our terms...
Okay, yeah, okay. I think I'm letting my warm feelings about this guy from years gone past affect me a bit there. This guy is dishonest. this guy is dishonest. So, you know, the way he's presented that is very dishonest, and he's trying to act like Jesse Singal is doing some sort of like, you know, unreasonable act there when he's not really. He's just like, you're talking loads of shit about me, why not debate me? And by the way, we'll donate money to charity too. So, okay, yeah. Dishonest. Dishonest, definitely. Like, he's more concerned with, like, winning. Chud had a gay relationship with him. No, I fucking didn't, dude. No, I didn't have a gay relationship with him, you fucking weirdo. God, it's always gay with you, isn't it? It's always gay.
Okay, that's wonderful. But how do I make money off depressed people?
Thank you for the super chats. Well, no, I mean, obviously, you know, I'm just trying to be realistic. I'm just trying to be realistic about what my thoughts are here, because I am willing to accept that, yeah, I could be having like a wrong perspective on this. Yeah, no, that is very dishonest. And in fact, yeah, there is times he's done that. He's not evil, but he's a bad he's a bad person for that, definitely. In fact, when I spoke to him ages ago, I think he did this. He tried. I think it was about a slur. It was about slurs and about the use of like the word cracker, and the fact people were getting banned for it. And I think he tried to characterize a point I was making, like I was trying to make like an all lives matter argument or something. I can't remember exactly. So yeah, I do recognize that he does this. He just kind of mischaracterizes very dishonestly what people are doing, what their intent is, or what they're trying to say.
We agreed to both, donate $1,000 to the Palestinian Children's Relief Fund. And again, it was just one of those strange, awkward moments where I was like, I didn't know if that was intentional or why he was doing that. Now, he does say in his podcast that he actually got that wrong, and he did. And so that's, I guess a good correction. But the fact that he left that in his unedited version made me want to actually address that. One of the biggest problems right now is actually getting life-saving aid into that part of the world, specifically because of...
Destiny docs Mike from PA because he said he's from Pennsylvania.
Yes, that's true. That did happen. Thank you for the 333. That's old drama, but yes, it did happen.
The blockade that Israel is imposing upon Palestinians. So there are GoFundMes to families so you can actually directly help support them materially. I'm personally donating to a bunch of them, so I'll include the links in the description of this video.
Thank you for taking the time to join me. Do you want to quickly tell our audience a little bit about who you are?
Bro, dude. Chud's totally going from he's not so bad to, oh right, he's a fucking lying loser wretch, actually. Well, I think I've not covered or talked about this guy in so long. You end up kind of forgetting little details and little behaviors that people engage in. And then straight away he does something like that and you're like, oh no, okay, he's done that. Well, that's pretty fucking shady, isn't it? So, okay. I'm just trying to be honest, guys. Just trying to be honest, okay? Just trying to be upfront with you guys.
Yeah, my name is Lance. I'm a, I suppose, comedian from Canada who covers news, politics, tries to make it entertaining. But like...
He's calling himself a comedian now. Oh my god, dude. Bloody comedian. Come on, dude. Where's all your jokes about how ugly trans people are if you're a comedian? Come on.
Most people who spend a lot of time on the internet obviously waste a little bit too much of my life on slop and other brain-rotting material.
As do we all. Yeah, so this, I explained in the intro, but this talk came about because, you were somewhat critical of me and some of the stuff I've written and said about youth gender medicine. And Katie and I have found that often when people criticize us, they're unwilling to then have a conversation. So I appreciate that. I'm going to let you sort of take the reins here. I will say to your audience, there was a miscommunication. I didn't expect this to be video. I look a little bit haggard from 4th of July drinking and a little bit of illness, so be merciful. But other than that, take it away.
Yeah, so I obviously have some pretty strong critiques of your work, and, I'm quite excited to have the opportunity to bring them up in person. I figured we'd use the infamous article that you published in The Atlantic, the cover story when kids say they're trans, kind of as a jumping off point, so we can go through it. And I'm pretty sure you'll probably hear a lot of these critiques before, but I went through the article again and reread the entire thing and wanted to kind of just break down each piece of it. And in the article, obviously, you spoke to a lot of people who had detransitioned, including Claire, Max Robinson, Carrie Stella, Carrie Callahan, and Delta. And for about the first 9,000 words of the piece, there's not really a single example of a well-adjusted or happy trans person who had gone through the process. Obviously...
Okay, I know what he's trying to say there, right? It just doesn't that sound terrible as an opening gambit. Yeah, look for your article about trans stuff. There doesn't seem to be any well-adjusted, happy trans people. What's that about? So obviously it's funny on the face of it because it makes it sound like he's accepting that there's not well-adjusted trans people. But also, it's I guess we'll let him see what he responds with. But I'm guessing that Jesse Singal isn't out there trying to find well-adjusted trans people. He's trying to find people for the purposes of the article that have obviously had bad experiences because, previously there's not been like a big spotlight shone on that. And for the longest time, people who were like detransitioners were treated very badly because, they would come out and talk about their experiences. And sometimes they would obviously slant more towards the right. And some of them you can even argue and maybe putting a bit of like a, I'm a right ringing out type thing. But I do feel like they were quite shunned by progressives because they were presenting a narrative that was contradictory to the idea that it's full steam ahead with trans stuff with no questions.
The examples that you use, starting with Claire, for example, you often invoke the fact that they had been suffering from depression, and that you believe, or at least the testimonies are leading you to believe, that this has something to do with outside influences that had somehow impacted their decision to want to transition in the first place. Is that fair?
Yeah, I mean,
I guess his point is there's too much focus on detransition, opening exclusively with that paints a lopsided picture. Bro, the pro-trans community for years painted a picture of trans people as being these happy people with no problems. So it's so obnoxious to act like something that's contradictory to that is in any way like unreasonable. No, it's actually totally fine to say, well, here's a contradiction to a broad narrative that progressives try and paint about this stuff.
I will say, I think you're lifting that language almost directly from Slate. The way Slate put it was, as the piece goes on, notably without a single happy, well-adjusted trans scene among its host of central characters for the first 9,000 plus words. There's a lot of trans adults cited further up in the story, but because of the structure of the story, yeah, I think it's trans adults. I wouldn't call Delta like a full-blown detransitioner. I'd call her a desister, but yeah, I think some of the detransitioners are higher up than the Orion Foss, and there was another kid who was sort of a happily transitioned young person. So yeah, in terms of the structure of it, I think that's mostly true.
So yeah, Slate's one of the many articles that I had to read to basically see the opposing sides that have already been brought up in relation to you. Right. But I wanted to go a couple steps further.
Dude, he literally got this argument from a fucking article. No. Okay, not the best start, but that's okay. Not the best start, but that's all right. That's okay. Well, I mean, the problem with that, I don't really care about the idea he's plagiarized it. It's funny to point that out, but what it does potentially suggest is that he hasn't done deep enough research into this to actually summarize and think of thoughts in his head about this. It straight away comes across like he's possibly just relying on what other people have said about this for your own arguments. Like talking point Andy. Yeah, exactly. Whereas what you should probably do is read something and understand it in its totality and then use your own thoughts to come to conclusions to make your own arguments about it. Oh no, not a good start.
So I actually broke down each one of their stories in words themselves, which that article didn't have. So Claire, it's 1,312 words related to her personal story. Max Robinson, 1,086 words related to her personal story. Carrie Stella, 100 words. Carrie Callahan, 530 words. Delta, 569.
Why does this matter? This is totally irrelevant. Why does it matter how many words are dedicated to a certain thing if an article has got a certain perspective or bent? Is Jesse Singal saying this article is a completely fair, balanced analysis of all trans issues for everyone? Or is it about, here's some stories that you might not hear otherwise, and therefore it's got more focus on that?
9 words. So that's approximately 3,600 words for all of the detransitioning stories. And then at the very end, there's what I considered, I suppose, the more positive stories. Scott Padberg, which he, him, 569 words. And then Orion Floss, he, him, which is 584. So the bulk of the article is dedicated to telling the stories of detransitioners and oftentimes highlighting things, not only that they had suffered depression, but in some cases that they had been sexually assaulted. In the case of Max Robinson, it talks about how she was raped.
Does this guy have jaundice or something? Why is he so yellow? Is he part Asian?
Thank you for the super chat. No, he's just this is lighting, I think.
At 13 years old, and then you felt necessary to include that at 14 she had watched her friend be sexually assaulted by another man, and then obviously bring up the depression and anxiety disorder that she experienced, and then in that case, as well as others such as hers and Claire's, there's obviously the implication that, so for Max Robinson, it was that she was watching the Tyra Banks show and that she had seen a sex worker, Buck Angel, talking about transition that influenced her decision. In Claire's case, it was a YouTuber. But this seems to be a frequent theme that you were highlighting between all of them. And I think my big point here is that on a topic of which the rates of transition and detransition are becoming clearer and clearer with more and more studies that come out, and obviously in terms of detransition, the rates are quite low. You chose to focus primarily. Well, we'll get to this part, right? We can go back and forth, and we can talk about study after study, but. Even in the article itself, right? You mentioned that, there's one study that references that.
Bro, look, dude, okay, yeah. He's such a wretch, man. Smuggling in these little talking points. Fortunately, Jesse Singal's on the ball and is calling out stuff that obviously I'm going to assume he's got a lot of knowledge about to call out. We'll see. But he's just basically trying to smuggle it in this statement. Oh, we'll get to that later.
Transition rates are very low at 2%. However, we can't truly know. I think what you've done here is effectively use a lot of anecdotal evidence as well as selective interviews to try and highlight a narrative that you yourself are trying to craft, which is that in each one of these cases, we have people who had been influenced by outside sources, oftentimes that experienced a severe trauma. And then for a reader who had never or doesn't know anything about this topic, if they come across this article and this is their introduction to trans people and the concept of transitioning, for example, they're going to come away with an article where the vast majority and the bulk of it really shows that this is something in which people are either doing because of social contagions, peer pressure.
Okay. Do progressives genuinely still reject the idea that there's at least a possibility that some people are influenced to do this, and there's not a more fundamental aspect at play here like they would want to believe? I just don't understand how you can legitimately argue that there's it seems to be the bent he's taking is oh, well, people might think that about this. But what is the problem if people think that anyway? What is the problem if people think that? Because there are at least some people that do it. Obviously, it might not be painting the whole picture, and you probably should read other sources about it to get a fuller understanding. But he's acting like it's a bad thing that people would think this. And I'm just a bit well, why is that a problem? Also, if the article has got a certain intent of what it's trying to put out and the story it's trying to do, well, it's trying to do that. People might take something away from it, but that doesn't mean that you need to write a story that is achieving something that you're not trying to do, which is to shine a light on all the trans issues and show how good trans people have got it, actually.
And potentially even sexual assault or, forms of depression and anxiety.
Yeah, there's sort of a 700 or 800 word bit at the top of the story above all the stuff you're talking about, or most of it, that talks about transition working and how there's been a long history of trans people not having access to it. So I guess I just question who would read the story and come away confused about my stance on whether some people should have access to this medicine. I think in some cases I was a little bit. Say again?
That wasn't my assertion. I said that you're crafting a narrative here for first person.
Bro, what are you on about? That's what you said that. You said that people would come away with a certain perspective, and he's saying there's information in there that would mean it would be difficult to come away from that perspective, because in the article you point out the opposite to that point.
Or a first-time reader on this topic who's going to walk away thinking that the majority of people who undergo transitioning eventually do detransition because the bulk of this is concentrating on, again,
but how would they come to that conclusion if I don't say that?
Oh, because so as a journalist, and this is why I think that you are particularly crafting what you do, it's not simply that you need to report on facts. I think that should be just the bare minimum, right? That you should be able to report factually on things that actually occur. But you are also crafting a narrative in what you choose to report on and what you choose to highlight and what you choose to actually bring a lot of attention to. And in the case of your story, I would say again.
Yeah, any article ever is doing that. This is such a worthless point. Yeah, obviously an article is got a certain purpose of what it's trying to do and what it's trying to achieve. And it's trying to craft a narrative. And he's acting like that's some terrible thing. And then he's also, I think, misrepresenting the actual narrative that Jesse's trying to craft, because he's claiming things can be taken away from it, where it's unreasonable to think that because there's words that would say otherwise in the text itself. Lance is very slimy. Yeah, very slimy debater. But I guess we'll see. I guess we'll see what happens. Let's see how he responds.
The overwhelming majority is spent on people who had experienced severe trauma, depression, perhaps even sexual assault or rape as children, and then at which point they had chosen to detransition. And you include that in the story to kind of craft the narrative so people reading it will then assume that or infer it.
Well, I think what I want people, what I was trying to get at with the article is that this is complicated, and when you're talking about young people and physical transition, especially permanent things like hormones, and I would argue puberty blockers shouldn't be considered reversible like they have been for a while. I think I might have even called them reversible, and that I don't think that's accurate anymore. I think it's complicated. And there's a big difference between a kid who has felt gender dysphoric their whole life and then is approaching puberty. I think a kid like that should be handled really differently from a kid like Max Robinson, where it comes on after a trauma. And what I've had trouble getting a straight answer from critics is like, it seems unlikely to me that you think gender identity exists in this sort of separate realm where it's totally separate or totally detached.
Right. So the point he's making is that people go through traumatic events and they have, what is it called? Rapid onset, like gender dysphoria, whatever the fuck it is. But there's like a rapid onset of feelings like this. And then they get put on these medical pathways. And he's saying that, well, maybe that means that they're not actually got that and it's a trauma that's causing it. Seems fairly reasonable to me. Dude. See, this is what I mean about Jesse Singal, dude. People represent him as this bigoted transphobe. He is more than fucking reasonable. And he even has opinions and perspectives that, like, transphobic people would find objectionable. Like, you know, the idea that the transition is successful or helps adults or whatever. Some people would fucking despise that. So he's basically, you know, I find he often gets, like, squeezed by both sides on this topic. And you can obviously take issue and disagree with his perspective on things. That's fine. But it's clear that Lance is doing it very dishonestly to paint him as some sort of bigot in order to dismiss what is, on the whole, largely reasonable, fair analysis of a very controversial, difficult topic.
From someone's peer influence, from cultural influence, from trauma. So to me, like if you read the article, you will see some more complicated cases because that's what the article was about, but it shows a range of outcomes. Now, data-wise, we don't know like how many people detransition. The most well-known researcher on this is a trans guy named Kinnan McKinnon. He says, depending on the study you look at, I forget the exact range he gave, but it can be anything from 5 to 20%. I think it's probably not as high as 20%. It also depends how you define it. Unfortunately, in this article, this was.
Okay, so he's flashing up the facts. And he said 20%, but he said, I don't think it's as high as 20%. So it's more or less exactly on the money of what he's saying.
And it also depends how you define it. Unfortunately, in this article, this was 7 years ago now, but I said detransition was rare. I don't stand by that. I think we basically, in part because trans people since like the 1950s have been getting fucked over and not had a lot of good research done on trans medicine. I think we don't know what the detransition rate is, especially for kids who didn't go through sort of the normal clinical process of the Dutch protocol, which involves a lot of therapy, a lot of talking through, a lot of discussing comorbidity. So if you have data, setting aside the fact this article is from 2018, if you have data showing...
Well, no, he said, I think the point he's making, I see what you're saying. 1 in 10 to 1 in 10 is pretty massive. Right, okay. I mean, dude, this is the thing. Whenever I see Jesse Singal, I'm always bemused by these claims that he's some bigot. He is like the most reasonable voice that is questioning of like the trans stuff. He's so fucking reasonable. And yet he gets painted as this terrible bigot all the time. He clearly knows his stuff and he's got reasonable, legitimate concerns about some of the fucking pro-trans narrative that gets pushed. And he's spent a time responding to that and correcting some of the misinformation. No, he didn't. He said, I think it's 5 to 20%, but I don't think it's as high as 20%. He misremembered the exact number, but even in saying it, he recognized that himself, he didn't think it was that high.
Like a reliable detransition involves a lot of therapy, a lot of talking through, a lot of discussing comorbidity. So if you have data, setting aside the fact this article is from 2018, if you have data showing like a reliable detransition rate, I'm all ears. I just haven't seen it.
Okay, if you don't mind, can we get to that after this part? Because I wanted to kind of compartmentalize each one of these. So if we're still speaking about these,
okay, I'm happy to. But let me just make one minor complaint, which is like if your whole thing is like I'm disproportionately focusing on X rather than Y, and my answer is, well, we don't know how X common is. You can understand. But
I totally agree with you. And I think that's a fair thing for me to have to disprove. So I've got
bro, dude, that's inconvenient. Let's get to that later. Dude, he's trying so hard to railroad the conversation in a way that he feels is going to benefit him. He doesn't want to address that now. When he's substantially responding to the criticism that he's making, which is, you're claiming it's like this much, but we just don't know. Little rat.
a breadth of studies that I eventually wanted to start talking about and unpacking piece by piece, but then we'd move away from this topic. And you actually asked the question that, could you also ask that question a little bit later as well? Because I want to answer it firsthand. Because, you know, anytime you're like, I haven't seen a single one of my critics capable of answering or responding to this, I think that it's important to actually unpack those. But maybe it would be easier if we had a baseline of something we can both agree with, so that I can actually try and see where the point of contention is. Would you agree with the assertion that, for example, homosexuals, gay people, were stigmatized heavily as being potential predators and pedophiles as a way of trying to
yes, they still are. There's been a resurgence of that. Yeah.
And do you agree that the majority of sexual offenders are cis heterosexual men?
Are cis heterosexual men?
Yes.
Probably.
The majority of sexual offenders.
That's the majority of people, because most.
Okay, I mean, you need to do the per capita breakdown, right?
Offenders are male, and most males are cis. Yeah, I would imagine. Yeah.
Okay, so granted that, if I wrote an article in which I was interviewing the victims of sexual assault, and I focused primarily on the victims of sexual assault who had been assaulted by homosexuals, even though they were telling their stories, this actually happened, and it was 100% factually true.
What?
Do you understand then that I would be crafting a narrative that would further stigmatize homosexuals, because I was focusing primarily, even though they were the minority of the offenders, I was crafting a narrative that when people read that story, they would read the personal testimonies of multiple people who had been assaulted.
Well, it depends how it's written. Dude, it depends how it's written, doesn't it? If it was like queers are doing X, Y, and Z, and it was very bigoted, then yeah, maybe you could argue that. But if it was like, look, you know, we don't think, you know, obviously there's a complex issue. It's not all gay people, okay, etc. And then you went on to talk about it. But there's literally nothing wrong with focusing on victims of like gay. I mean, you could argue this is like, you know, Catholic or something, like a Catholic article talking about, you know, gay abuse in the fucking Catholic Church or something. Like, do you know what I mean? It's like, you can focus on that if you want, as long as you do it in a reasonable way and you're not just trying to make out like all gays do this. It's fine. Also, the thing is, he's doing this thing, classic lefty thing. What about the per capita rates? I don't know what they are, but obviously there are more cisgendered heterosexual men than there are gay men. So what's the rate when you compare it to actual population rate? Despite making up X amount of the population, gays account for X amount of the nonsense.
And then walk away from that perhaps more frightened, contributing then to the stigmatization of gay people.
So just to make the analogy fit, in this hypothetical article, you'd also interview people who are sexually assaulted by cis men. We're not doing cis or trans here. I'm doing heterosexual or homosexual. But yes, I would interview, say, 6 people who had been sexually assaulted by homosexuals, and then 1 person who had been sexually assaulted by a heterosexual. I mean, if your article was just about sexual assault and how common it is, I would find that odd. I think this analogy fails for a number of reasons. One of which is this is a pretty new medical protocol that's been around since 2008-ish, or, you know, Dutch did it a little bit earlier, and we don't know much about it. So I think if you're writing about a new thing where you don't know the base rates, I guess I'm just confused as to what in my Atlantic article you would find to be stigmatizing of trans people. What is?
Yeah, exactly. This is the problem. Is like you could write an article like that, and it's about how it's written. Like, what is stigmatizing? If you were saying they're all like this. If they were saying, they're all like this, guys, they're all like this. Anyway, here's 6 victims, but they're all like this. Then yeah, obviously that's stigmatizing. But if it's just talking about an issue broadly, as long as you're not doing that, then what does it matter? Like, where's the stigmatization in Jesse's article that would allow you to claim that there's like reasonable stigmatization coming off the back of it?
A quote in my article that you think, you know, cast aspersions on trans people, the trans experience.
But just to be clear, you would agree that if I did that, that was demonstrating that I, as the...
Bro! The debate sophistry shit, man, is so irritating. You would agree. Trying to railroad him into agreeing with his stupid fucking analogy that he just made up.
The person who was writing the article, the journalist in this case, was distinctly trying to push a narrative, and in order to fearmonger towards homosexuals, that there are higher rates. I would disproportionately be crafting a narrative that isn't true in doing so. Just in my personal example. I'm not talking about your article. Just to finish that analogy.
Well, yeah, but you're trying to draw an analogy. I disagree with the analogy, but sure. Yeah, I'll get that. Yeah.
Okay. So, well, again, you're asking a question that I've already answered, because I think if you write an article in which the bulk of the article...
Dude, I don't even know if I would agree with that even. Because it's about how it's written. But obviously Jesse's taking a different tact and handling it from the perspective of, well, you know, it doesn't really fit as an analogy. But I mean, I don't think that's true necessarily anyway.
Article talks about the negative experiences that cis people have experienced, especially detransitioners who went through the process. Anyone who walks away from reading that article, where the vast majority of the words are spent interviewing people who had negative experiences, are going to think that the overwhelming amount of trans people who undergo transitioning experience a negative effect. The majority of the article is spent on interviewing it, right? There's only two people that you've interviewed in the article. Again, Scott Padberg, Orion Floss, who, by the way, both happen to be he, him. I'm also curious as to why every single person who's a detransitioner was a woman. Was that just the people who had been responding, or was that a...
Chud is burning the surf bridge. Dude, what you want about, dude? I've not been friendly with the serfs for fucking years. Right. That ship has long sailed. Forget that.
a personal choice?
You're asking whether detransitioners or the happily transitioned are biological females.
Yeah, so the detransitioners, aka people who are cis and always were cis, are all women, every single one of them. And then the people who I could say are closest to happily transitioned trans people are both men, are both he, him. Was that an editorial decision, or was that just...
in other words, so everyone involved was a natal female?
That's not my question. My question is, again, so the majority of people that you chose...
You're saying there were two happily transitioned people, and they were both trans guys?
Yeah, they were both men.
Of the two, they were both... no, I mean, there was no... I mean, that's just like who the best stories were. There's also... If you go to a youth gender clinic today, 70 to 80% of the people at that clinic for youth services will be natal females. So it makes sense that's who you would find if you look for some kids to talk to.
So it wasn't a decision on your part. It was simply how this worked.
Bro, so basically, he's trying to paint him as making certain decisions. And it's just like the native dude. I need to listen to that again.
Everyone in
men who are curious as to why every
the words,
the majority of
The reality of all this is Jesse Singal shit is that lib lefties are mad that there is a guy who's ostensibly on their team saying things that contravene the party line on trans issues. Therefore, they can't impeach what he's saying by calling him a racist, homophobe, and so on. But they do anyway. Dude, that's so funny, isn't it? Because you're right. He's supposed to be on their team and he's doing wrong thing. So they just do it anyway and call him a fucking transphobe. He's obviously not a fucking transphobe.
The article is spent on interviewing it, right? There's only two people that you've interviewed in the article. Again, Scott Padberg, Orion Floss, who, by the way, both happen to be he, him. I'm also curious as to why every single person who's a detransitioner was a woman. Was that just the people who had been responding, or was that a personal choice?
He is asking the question, but he's obviously trying to imply that there's some sort of reason that he's doing that when, yeah, it just makes sense. I mean, you know... The thing is, the reason I think that there's so many, like you're generally going to find more natal females, is because the rate of natal females seeking out support because of gender-based issues has skyrocketed. You can look at the graphs, and natal females, it's like fucking this. It like literally goes up like a fucking cliff. So naturally, that's who you're going to run into more, is natal females, you know, that are gonna, it just makes more sense that's gonna happen. So what this shows is that like Lance is just very badly read on this, right? Like I can see the graph in my head. I don't have it to hand. You have to take my word for it, right? Or go and look it up. Or if someone can link it, I'll show it because I don't know where it is exactly. But this is just like basic stuff you would know if you actually had good knowledge and research on it, right? Now the thing is I'm not that bothered about doing a fucking debate about trans issues necessarily. But this guy is speaking to the guy who knows about this shit. And he's making little fluff-ups like that, not understanding as to why it just makes sense that you'd have more natal females represented. He just doesn't know some of the basics of this to have this debate. But for some reason, he's decided to have this fucking debate. It's ridiculous.
You're asking whether detransitioners or the happily transitioned are biological females?
Yeah, so the detransitioners, aka people who are cis and always were cis, are all women, every single one of them. And then the people who I could say are closest to happily transitioned trans people are both men, are both he, him. Was that an editorial decision, or was that just...
in other words, so everyone involved was a natal female?
That's not my question. My question is, again, so the majority of people that you chose...
You're saying there were two happily transitioned people, and they were both trans guys?
Yeah, they were both men.
Of the two, they were both... no, I mean, there was no... I mean, that's just like who the best stories were. There's also... If you go to a youth gender clinic today, 70 to 80% of the people at that clinic for youth services will be natal females. Yes. So it makes sense that's who you would find if you look for some kids to talk to.
So it wasn't a decision on your
that's
part. It was
wonderful.
simply
But how do I
how
make money off
this worked
depressed
out.
people?
How it shook
This
out.
is the definition of bad faith. Only so ham-fisted it looks more like parody than sophistry. Remember when this guy kept defending Illuminati?
Yes, that was classic. When Illuminati was clearly in the wrong. Thank you for the super chat. And then they fucking wiped them out of their little gay podcast. Very funny. Dude, it's funny seeing like the debate tricks from a total like fucking retard. Where he's like, so you mean this? It's like he's fearful of like losing a point or something. And Jesse Singal just sounds totally reasonable and correct in like his analysis and what he's saying, and well, it's because of this reason. He's like, so you're saying it wasn't for personal reasons? He's clearly on tenterhooks, not wanting to like lose a point. It's so pathetic, dude.
Yeah.
Okay, understanding. Did you get to pick the photos that were used, out of curiosity? The pictures? Did you have any editorializing on that?
Does the author of you're asking if the author of an Atlantic piece gets to choose the photos? No,
I'm just asking if you had any
any
editorial decision making. I'm just asking. This is not my line of work, right? So I'm having to ask you. But I'm curious.
So what happened?
Oh, dude, this is such bullshit. You're obviously asking because you've got some sort of comment about the types of pictures that were used. So you're wanting to act like he's got these pictures and put them in the article to make them look bad or something, I'm guessing. But and it's obviously not the case. It clearly is not the case. It's not going to be the case that you as the author decide what pictures you use. That's going to be, the printing or whatever of it. Another person will probably deal with that. He's trying to pull these like weird gotchas, yeah. Like it's like traps, constantly setting out these little traps in the conversation to try and get him, rather than just have an honest debate and conversation about the topic at hand.
What happened here, unfortunately, was a trans model signed a release giving the editors permission to use I believe they used they them pronouns at the time and still do, to use their image on the cover. Then after the article came out and they were unhappy about it, they said that they had been lied to somehow, which I've never quite understood, because to me, if I sign a release saying you can use my photo in this, but if there's more to that story, you can let me know. But that a lot of people were complaining about that. I feel like that was unfair to the art department, who just like followed the rules completely and got a release from the model. But I don't know.
Oh, this one. Dude, flashing this up, dude. This is so fucking shady. Flashing up these articles, trying to like, oh yeah, look. Dude, clearly Lance knows he's done badly, and he's trying to fucking smooth over the cracks by throwing up these little things to make it look like he's making a fucking good point of this. Trans cover model discusses being misgendered and outed by The Atlantic. I don't know the details of this. But I mean, yeah. I mean, I would imagine you need to get a release signed. So, I mean, I would probably favour Jesse's presentation of this.
I don't have anything to do with that decision because I'm a freelancer and a writer, not a photographer.
Right, absolutely. But so
Yeah.
just to be clear, it's he, him. So it uses he, him pronouns, and he was featured on the cover of the article. Do you not think it was unfair to him that, the way that the article used his photo and then said, your child says she's trans, she wants hormones and surgery, she's 13.
Oh my god, dude. This person gave their permission for their photo to be used and then complained they were outed to their parents when they used it. Totally retarded. And also, the other thing as well is I would presume that the contract for that would have provisions to explain, like you are essentially given permission for them to use it however they so wish, right? So, I mean, this just seems like a total nothing point. And then on top of that as well, you're trying to put this on Jesse Singal, when Jesse Singal was not responsible for this anyway. Like, this is not Jesse Singal's doing. This is to do with The Atlantic. Like, take it up with the editor. For fuck's sake, this is not to do with Jesse Singal.
That effectively not only misgendered him, but then outed him as being trans to his family through the process, something that's extremely dangerous for anyone who's LGBTQ+.
Do you think that if a trans person is in the closet and doesn't want to be outed, they should participate in a photo shoot about trans people?
That wasn't my question, though. Your answering question was a question. I'm just...
Bro! That's a totally reasonable question. No way. Dude, that's so unreasonable.
Just tell you the reality of what happened as a result of being in that photo shoot.
So this person was outed against their will?
According to his testimony, yes.
I guess okay, so like I look stereotypically Jewish. I have a big nose. You don't have to respond to that, but it's true. If I felt like I didn't want people to know I was Jewish and I signed my name to a form saying this is going to be a photo gallery of Jewish people, and then I complained this outed me as Jewish, that would seem pretty silly to me, because I signed a piece of paper saying I'm giving you permission to use me for this story about being Jewish. So I guess that's always confused me. I think maybe what this person should have done if they didn't want to be out.
Bro, Chud, it's kind of pissing me off that you were saying this guy was a do-gooder just using motivated reasoning. Get over it, Stylo. I've already given you a fucking W, okay? Holy shit, dude. Bro. Yes, you were right and I was wrong. What more do you want me to say? What more do you want me to say? You were right. I was being too gracious to him. I was being too nice to him because of the bias from years gone. Dude, what can I say? You were right. I was wrong.
Outed or weren't out is not participate in a photo shoot about trans youth, but I can't speak to their experience or his experience. I'm sorry.
So it's kind of a fuck around and find out scenario.
Fuck around in the sense of signing a thing saying I'm being photographed for a story about trans.
Fuck around and find out. No, it's very obvious what he's saying. If you're worried about getting outed as being trans, don't participate in a photo shoot and then agree for that to be used on the cover of a magazine. Dude, I'm not going to time you out, dude. It's funny, man. It's funny. Just imagine you there like, I can't believe this chunk guy said that when I've already said that I was wrong. John was letting his relationship with Lance bias his take. What relationship, dude? I used to be friendly with the guy. That's it. There was no relationship.
Youth.
Okay.
Is that what you mean by fuck around? Well,
No,
actually,
no.
can I just ask you though, if you do you get what I'm saying? That like if you sign something saying I'm choosing to be featured in this magazine, I mean, what do you think should have happened?
I think that there's a large amount of people who are trying to get into a very difficult field, such as modeling or anything related to that. And so if you sign up for something where it's like, hey, by the way, this is a casting call. We're going to be talking to different teens, their views on transition. And that's essentially what the casting call was, according to the article.
Censoring dissent against a fellow Gawk enjoyer.
Thank you for the $5. Simon Dudley, appreciate it. Thank you. Chud and Lance sucking up either end of a spaghetti string and meeting in the middle. Okay, dude.
That was written about this, and in relation to
Sorry,
that.
I'm getting distracted. What was that? Dude, you guys fucking me up, dude.
You know.
Fuck around in the sense of signing a thing saying I'm being photographed for a story about trans youth.
Yeah, dude, it's like, God, it is coming back to me now. I should never have doubted Stylo, okay? It is coming back to me now because it's like the dishonesty of the representation of what Jesse is saying there. Jesse is clearly not saying fuck around and find out. Jesse is saying something far more reasonable. Okay? What Jesse is saying is very simply, right? Very simply what Jesse is saying is it seems unwise to do a photo shoot and agree for that photo shoot to be used on a magazine if you're concerned about being outed as an LGBT person. That's literally his point. And Lance presents that as, so what's that mean? Fuck around and find out? No, he's not saying fuck around and find out. He is saying that this person is engaged in an inadvisable course of action based on their stated issue that they didn't want to be outed. And also what it does is undermines that point, because is it really reasonable to think that this person was terrified of being outed if they were willing to do a photo shoot and sign a waiver for it to be used, you know?
Okay.
Is that what you mean by fuck around? Well,
No,
actually,
no.
can I just ask you though, if you do you get what I'm saying? That like if you sign something saying I'm choosing to be featured in this magazine, I mean, what do you think should have happened?
I think that there's a large amount of people who are trying to get into a very difficult field, such as modeling or anything related to that. And so if you sign up for something where it's like, hey, by the way, this is a casting call, we're going to be talking to different teens, their views on transition. And that's essentially what the casting call was, according to the article that was written about this. And in relation to that, they were not aware, when this was taking place, that, he was going to be used in this respect to be an article that is now considered to be highly controversial. And then
he was
the
aware,
end
though,
result
because
was
he
that
signed
this,
a release giving.
Oh, absolutely. I'm not saying that this is
permission.
illegal. That would be a different accusation, right? I'm saying, yeah, you signed a release.
Dude, he's so dishonest, man. No, that's not the contention here. The point is, this guy is an idiot for signing a waiver. You can't really complain about being outed when you willingly signed a waiver agreeing to participate in a photo shoot that you used for a magazine. That's the point. And you're trying to argue that.
I mean, at the end of the day, the Atlantic had the legal rights to do with whatever they wanted with it, right? When I say...
And morally, you have no claim. If you sign a release and you're a legal adult saying you can use my photo for this, you have no moral claim if someone then uses your photo for it.
Right, but
yes.
You don't think that it's at all unfortunate then? Maybe that's a way of putting it. That as a result
I guess
of being
I'm curious how this...
Bro, unfortunate. Yeah, unfortunate that the person was an idiot, if that really is how they feel about it. I mean, what are you supposed to say? They signed the waiver. They agreed to fucking be used on the fucking... What? So and also it's like we're now just watering down the argument to like, it was unfortunate. I mean, what does that even mean? Unlucky. What, this womp, yeah.
This person was outed by being on the cover. Do you have the backstory on that?
Yeah, so according to the article that's in them.us, Brewer's photo appeared on the cover to illustrate a story about Jesse Singal, a journalist who's covered the trans community in notably dishonest terms in the past. The cover line in Brewer's photo appeared next to, your child says she's trans, she wants hormones and surgery, she's 13. Brewer told Pointner that he used they them pronouns at the time, but now he uses he him pronouns. That was 22 years ago. And it outed his gender identity to his immediate family and members before he felt ready to tell them. He didn't know much about the story that his photo would be used to illustrate. He'd originally responded to an open casting call by photographer so-and-so, who's working for the New Yorker and the New York Times, for a photo shoot on an article about...
At worst, this could be some misunderstanding, I think. Maybe some sort of misunderstanding between the Atlantic. Maybe they didn't explain it clearly enough, possibly. But I don't think... I mean, the Atlantic... I mean, first of all, it's run by a Jew. And also, it does lean more kind of progressive. So I don't think they're out here to, like, out teenagers to their... parents unwillingly. Like, at absolute worst, it's a misunderstanding. And obviously it gets spun up because of because of what the article is about. It obviously gets spun up into some sort of like deranged, excessive criticism against the Atlantic that goes way beyond what is reasonable. Anyway, come on. Call it with the anti-Semitic remarks. Yeah, dude, this is so true of the way that him and others debate. Lance is trying to debate bro win an argument instead of trying to understand where Jesse is coming from or believes him. It's like he's got all these traps in his backpack that he wants to lay out for Jesse to fucking step in. And Jesse is not doing that. Jesse just wants to have a conversation and wants to understand why people think the way they think about his articles based on the facts of what it is,
Gender dysphoria that was debating different views on teens wanting to transition.
Sorry, I'm sorry, current pronouns is he, right?
He, him, yeah.
Okay, so he signed a form saying, I'm participating in a photo shoot about teens seeking to transition, right?
Yeah.
Okay. We might have to agree to disagree on this one, because to me, if I sign a form saying I'm participating in a photo shoot about this sensitive issue, it just doesn't make sense to then say I was outed against my will. And I think that's really unfair to sort of the art folks at the Atlantic who, that's a really tough story to illustrate. I have no idea how I would have done it, but I don't think they did anything wrong. But
they took a photo of him. They used the photo for the cover of the Atlantic. And then in that picture, right beside it, it says, she wants hormones and surgery. She's 13. She was 22 at the time. Sorry, he was 22 at the time in this case. So he was 22 years old. But this front page now says she's 13. She wants hormones and surgery right beside his photo.
Okay, but I think that, there's often cases like that. I mean, what idiot is thinking that fucking person is 13? First of all, that's fucking ridiculous. Okay, I think it's just one of those things where the image is just representative of what the article is about, but obviously it's not meant to be referring to what the words are saying. Like, this is fairly common with magazine covers,
Right, which again. You don't think that it is all yours.
This is like when I put a quote from Chud next to someone on a thumbnail and it makes it seem like they're saying some outlandish thing. But really it was Chud who said it. Yeah, it's just like editorializing. I just don't think it's that deep. At worst, a miscommunication or misunderstanding or something. But that's it, and certainly not worth all this fucking debating over.
Responsible to put that in giant words right beside his picture.
It's just I feel like there's a crossed wires here, because like, so if there's a photo of about youth soccer in Time magazine and they get a bunch of kids and put them in a soccer uniform, those kids, that no one look at that as like, that's a real kid who actually plays soccer. It's your modeling.
Yes.
Like you can use
yes, exactly, bro. Yes, Jesse, exactly my point. Well done, mate. Well done for taking my point. Good job.
Model's image in a lot of ways. So your complaint is that it was inaccurate about their gender identity?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, well, first off, I think like anyone looking at this cover again, especially if you're not familiar with this topic, and you see his face, and then you see the words, misgendering him, and saying that he's 13 years old. This implication is probably for some part of the story, one of the other people that you interviewed, because this person, he's not even featured in your article, right? But in so doing, that's part of the aspect that I think is also disingenuous.
Oftentimes a magazine cover will like speak and sort of like, that's the kind of scenario the story's about. What do you do if your kid wants to go on hormones or get surgery?
Right. So and again, this is something that you have nothing to do with. You didn't pick the words.
So the thing is, they've gone off on this point, and Jesse, I think, has made some good points in contradiction to this. But it's not even his fucking thing anyway. It's nothing to do with him. It's literally not his fucking lookout. He wrote the article, that's it. He's not responsible for the cover, for the photos, nothing. Dude. Jesse, I knew that Jesse was going to do very well, but Lance looks absolutely awful here, man. He's literally just flailing for anything he can get to get a dunk. It's pathetic.
That would appear on the cover of The Atlantic. That was their own editorial decision, but it's just something that you also don't feel morally conflicted about because he had agreed to it.
I feel pissed off because it's fine if this person was unhappy with their decision to participate in the photo shoot, that's fine. I felt like The Atlantic got a little bit of a raw deal because they didn't do anything wrong, and I still haven't heard from you what they did wrong.
Well, I think the first thing that they did wrong was put in giant bold letters that, he is a 13-year-old, he is a she.
Bro, he's literally just addressed this. You have a model that isn't exactly about the words that are on the page. Does he not understand how a magazine front cover works? Does he think that whenever there's someone on the front cover, that's the person that's being spoken about every time?
And that again, anyone who's seen this cover, for example, if you were the family members of, like, his family, obviously, I suppose, according to him, saw this cover, recognized him, and then was like, whoa, at the time he was going by they, them, but now, based on this cover, it says that you're a 13-year-old who wants hormones and surgery, and it turns out that he, in fact, was trans and has undergone, gender-affirming care, but that was information that his family was not privy to. So your defense of that is just that he shouldn't have done the photo shoot in the first place. Then, if that was...
Well, sorry, what information was his family not privy to?
The fact that he was trans.
But he signed a release to be in I'm sorry, I feel bad. Like, he signed a release saying, I'm going to...
Bro, dude, this is fucking outrageous. How on earth can that be a complaint when you're signing a fucking waiver to participate in this, knowing it's about trans issues?
Be in a photo shoot about trans kids. Right.
So in that sense, it's on you, right? Like you made that decision. That's
what a photo release is. The reason to sign a photo release is to say I'm letting my photo out into the world. I think I got the sense he was unhappy with the article, which he has every right to be. But
well, I guess if you want to ask for an extreme comparison, if there was a photo shoot of say me and they used my photo,
I think the reality is this person was happy for the photo to be used as long as the article had a certain tone. And it did not have a tone that he liked or agreed with, so made some fucking bullshit thing up to kick up a fuss in order to smear the article. That is what happened here. It's so fucking obvious.
And it was in an interview where I was discussing, say, how much I hate white supremacists or white supremacism, and they used my picture on the cover, and then all of a sudden there was a quote beside it, and it was like, the leading white supremacists in Canada, but my picture was right there, and I'm in the article speaking out against that. I would say that was a disingenuous way of using my photo, even though I'd signed a release form, even though I'd agreed to be a part of this photo shoot. They were manipulating the way my picture is now being perceived by the public.
I think your argument would be right if they had listed the model's name and if it wasn't like such an abstracted photo illustration. In your example, they're using you, Lance, like an actual but
yeah, exactly. Like the person is a model to represent the tone of what's being discussed or the topic of what's being discussed. Whereas in that example, it's about you as a person. And this person is just a model to represent on the cover what the fucking tone and the topic is of the article.
But I will say, like, we should talk more about stuff I've actually written. But I'm happy to defend the Awareness decisions on this week. Yeah.
How do I make money off depressed people?
Why does it seem like these super progressives inatilize trans people so much? It's like they aren't capable of consenting to just existing normally.
Thank you for the $5, Silent with Dudley. Thank you. Yep. Yeah, of course. It's ridiculous. I mean, I think also with this particular conversation, I'm pretty sure that there's people who have been saying, like, Lance, you're not doing us any favors here, bro. Just stop debating, man. You're literally making it harder for us. Pretty tough. Pretty tough.
I can move on then. So I wanted to talk about the newer studies that come out, because you said you've not heard of any studies that actually show that the rates of children who actually desist are low. This is something
Sorry, are we talking desistance or detransition?
Well, we can talk about both. We can talk about satisfaction rates for children who transition, and at which point how they feel and how much satisfaction they have, and how many of them actually choose to detransition. But this is something in which the overwhelming amount of data that has come out internationally from study after study on this topic shows very, 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 very low rates of detransitioning, to the point where for someone to infer that they could be high or low.
Yes. It's very sneaky how Lance tries to force the convent down a path people have zero way to argue. Why is Jesse being made to answer for the editor's decisions? It's just a tactical time waster. Yeah, it's almost like he's probing to see if he can get a dunk somewhere. Like, obviously, if he was the decision maker for the photo, he would then use that against him and try and, like, go super hard at him for that, wouldn't he? And try and make out like he's, well, clearly you're transphobic because look at how you used this model's photo and you misgendered them and da-da-da-da-da, right? But obviously he's not responsible. So all he can do is just argue the principles a bit because it's not his responsibility. And that's it.
Low. Like, this is, again, not my area of expertise. This is something that you've written way more about than I have. But, have you pulled up the levels of satisfaction and regret after gender affirming care in adolescents? 2024 U.S. study, which showed 97% continued access to gender affirming care, and their satisfaction rate was 6.5 out of 7 on an average of 6 to 10 years after transition.
Sure. So the problem here is there's also a study based on, like, U.S. military healthcare records where
Detransition rates are very low, but the data is very inconclusive at current and maybe not even largely indicative of what we're looking to measure. Yeah.
I forget the exact number. I'll include links to all these studies in our show notes. 25% had discontinued a few years later. And Kinnan McKinnon's point, this is this researcher who studies this stuff, is that depending on how you ask the question, you get a lot of different answers. And a lot of the studies saying a 1 or 2 or 3% regret rate only count kids who come back to the clinic and say, I transitioned, here I am. And that's, if a lot of them don't come back because they feel like they were burned by clinics that didn't give them good care. So I used to say, I cited this statistic that the desistance rate, not detransition, desistance, is 80%. I no longer use that because I think there's a lot of fuzziness here. I just feel the same way about the detransition research. I think there's an article I'll include a link to, and this is just one person's opinion. It is a peer-reviewed article. The detransition rate is unknown. The author is Cohn, Archives of Sexual Behavior. That's my view, is the detransition rate is unknown. Because if I have 100 patients who come through my clinic and 2 years later I reach out to them and I get in touch with 50 of them, and they're all happy, that's not a 0% detransition rate. It's an I don't know detransition rate because I've lost track of 50 of them, or 50% of them. Do you get what I'm saying? Like, if you don't know what happened,
I get what you're saying, but you immediately just took a peer-reviewed study that I was referencing, and this is a recent one. This one was from 2024 and discounted it just out of the gates and said, yeah, the truth is that, hey, by the way, there's another study that shows, if we interview military personnel, that this is just not the case. That's one of, again, many studies that you can pull up. There's re-identification with birth registered sex in Western Australian pediatric gender clinic cohort. This was an Australian study of 500.
Bro, dude, this is so pathetic. They basically get a bunch of studies that agree with their position and they just spin it off. And they just go, oh, well, no, this study says this. But obviously, it's about what is the meat and potatoes of that study. Like, what is, like, the logic of it and how is it, And the thing is they're trying to act like there's this big pile of studies, but when you look at it, that's when it starts to fall apart. And that's something that Jesse Singal has pointed out. And it's something that the Cash Review pointed out as well. It's the lack of quality information about much of these topics. But they're progressives still just bang on that, like, oh, I've got all these studies that show my point exactly. Look, da-da-da-da-da. But when you start to dig into it, that's when it starts to be a problem. But let's see how he handles this.
or 50% of them. Do you get what I'm saying? Like, if you don't know what happened,
I get what you're saying, but you immediately just took a peer-reviewed study that I was referencing, and this is a recent one. This one was from 2024, and discounted it just out of the gates and said, yeah, the truth is that, hey, by the way, there's another study that shows, if we interview military personnel, that this is just not the case. That's one of, again, many studies that you can pull up. There's re-identification with birth registered sex in Western Australian pediatric gender clinic cohort. This was an Australian study of 552 patients. They showed 1% of trans youth re-identified with their sex assigned at birth, 4% re-identified during mental health assessments period or earlier did not proceed with gender affirming care. There's also a more nuanced story. The pediatric gender affirming healthcare is associated with satisfaction and confidence from 2024. This one, once again, 88% expressed satisfaction, 86.7% felt confident out of 141 on hormones. Only one person, sorry, I want to finish saying this because I think it's important for your audience. Only one.
Bro, dude, this is so, dude. The idea that his audience are not going to be way more knowledgeable than probably you are about this, dude. Literally, this is like Gish Gallop, just study. And it's like, well, hang on a minute. Like, the methodology, how many people, like, there's lots of details about studies you need to understand to know if it's actually good or not. But he's literally just rattling off the top line stuff, hoping he can convince him that he's got a pile of studies that basically just back him up. This is such classic, like, bread tube debating shit, man. It's so obnoxious.
Person, 0.7%, regretted both hormone therapy and surgery. Now, for longitudinal studies, which is something that I know you've often asked about as well, there's the gender identity 5 years after social transition. This one was 2022 in the US, which included 317 youth, 208 trans girls, 109 trans boys, and I think this is one of the ones that you personally critiqued. But 94% maintained their gender identity without regret. 3.5 became non-binary, and only 2.5 reverted back to being cis. And of all these studies, the reason that is often given for people who do detransition, or even in desistance cases, is social stigma, the social stigma that's applied to this. Now, I think one of the problems you have when people want to go back and forth on the data, and even if it's someone like me who wants to, exclusively refer to peer-reviewed studies only, is that you can look at meta-analysis of the studies. You can look at, pooling of the studies, right? Like there's the regret after gender affirmation study, the systematic review. That one analyzes 27 studies.
You mean the one in the journal of, it analyzed how many?
This one analyzes 27 studies, pooling 7,928 trans patients internationally. And of that study, the majority of them are on adults.
Hey, I feel bad, but I'm not like they're talking over me.
But how
Let me
do
just
I make
because
money off depressed people?
Hey, what study determines a satisfied transition? Thank you for the super chat.
Or on adults.
Hey, I feel bad, but I'm not like they're talking over me. Let me just because I'm very familiar with these studies. So the one you just mentioned,
sure.
They doubled their sample size through an error. Their sample size was 50% high. Let me pull up the actual. This is Bustos et al., right?
Hold on.
Yeah, regret after gender affirmation surgery, a systematic review and meta-analysis of prevalence.
Yes, it's Bustos.
This was a study. I've written about it. Sure. I forget the exact. They basically doubled their sample size because they did not correctly transfer the data from the studies they were looking at into their meta-analysis. And to this day, there's this team. I think it's one psychiatrist in Australia and a few researchers in London or thereabouts who've been trying to get them to correct the numerous errors with it. Now, even if I've written about this study in particular, even if you accepted their claims at face value, the overall loss to follow-up rate was 40%. So there's two things here. If this was a great meta-analysis, we would still not know what happened to 40% of the participants, but they just won't correct their errors. There's sort of a long paper trail. And unfortunately, I found this. Oh my God.
Dude, Jesse is absolutely fucking dog walking him here. This is insane. So he's listed off all these studies. He's plucked one out that I would guess he probably knows about all of this shit he's trying to say. And he literally knows it way better than he does. Lance has literally just got surface level views on it because he's going off the fucking progressive talking points. But Jesse Singal knows it in so much depth that he knows, like, they've made mistakes in it, and that's why it looks like that. Bro, this is so demonstrating the superficial kind of research that a lot of these bread tubers do, where they literally just have got a very shallow understanding of it, and then Jesse Singal obviously knows the ins and outs of it and is just fucking bodying him.
Before I got into the gender stuff, I wrote a whole book about other sort of popular science ideas where there was very little accountability and researchers don't correct their errors, and it's just science is in a bad place right now. It isn't just youth gender medicine, but I would just make 2 points, one of which is this is the single most viral study on the regret question, despite having all sorts of uncorrected errors. And if the overall loss to follow-up rate is 40%, that means you don't know. So the Australian study you just mentioned, you probably don't know. I don't think what's the loss to follow-up rate? Do you know that?
Is this the one in which there's a difference between the Yeah, so in that case, when you're saying there's a loss of 40% of the people who return to ask the questions, right? That doesn't mean that you can classify them as desisters or detransitioners or simply...
No. What I'm saying is if you, lost to follow-up.
Bro, he's not saying that. He's saying that you can't truly know the facts because there's so many people that you're not talking to about it. You're not automatically assigning them as detransitioners. You're just saying that you've not got accurate information because you're missing 40% of the people.
Just means you don't know. I don't know like how many of them detransitioned or desisted. But the point is, if you've lost 40% of your sample, and in the Australian one you brought up as a 2024 one, do you know what the loss to follow-up rate in that one is?
No, I don't have the data.
Okay. So again, this is like...
You're talking about 2024.
Bro, totally wrecked. Just completely exposed him as not knowing the depth about these studies and literally just knowing the headline talking points. Dude, he has just fucking bodied him. That is insane. No, I don't know. Oh. That's rough.
Okay, that's wonderful. But how do I make money off depressed people?
I haven't even thought about Lance since he and that twin rabbit Sky got obliterated by the B team.
Thank you for the $5. Yeah, dude, that was classic. Yeah, I don't have the data for the study I'm referencing to that's quite important to make my point. Oh, dude. It just exposes what he's doing. It just totally exposes that he just does not know about this stuff. And he's just literally rattling off talking points off the back of like the progressive narrative about it. Oh.
Or re-identification with birth-registered sex in Western Australian pediatric gender clinic cohort.
This is the one you mentioned as an example of how
yeah, the one that you're invoking that I invoked, that would be the one from 2024. So
okay. I would just say it's probably important to know what the loss to follow-up rate is. Now, I think the Dutch have probably done the best job. They have a couple of studies where people who go through this pretty intensive diagnostic process where like, I think trans activists think it's too harsh, but it's like if you have a lot of other mental health comorbidities, they don't let you transition. I think they've done a couple of studies where like loss to follow-up isn't too high. And if you go through this strict process, yeah, the outcomes appear to be pretty good. But I don't know how things are going in Canada. In the US, we have a totally different protocol where a lot of clinics are not doing a lot of gatekeeping. And I guess that's what worries me, because I don't think there would be much of a story here if like in every case of a young person getting hormones or surgeries or blockers, there'd been an extensive assessment period. But we know from Reuters reporting, from a little bit of my reporting, that's not the norm. So that's what I'm worried about. And that's why I think like it's important to dig into these regret studies and say, if you have kids coming through your clinic and you're giving them major medical treatments and then 40% of them disappear, and I'm 40%, it's usually lower than that, but 30%, and you can't follow up with them, how can you say it's a successful treatment or that they're happy? You don't know that. So that's why I say the detransition rate, in my view, is unknown. I would not say it's super high, which some gender critical activists do, just because like, the detransition subreddit is getting bigger. That doesn't tell us it's high. I have no confidence it's low, because every time I've looked at a study that seems to say it's low, it has what to me are pretty major problems.
So speaking about the United States, again, yeah,
he's just fucking owned him. I mean, dude, this is ridiculous, bro. And now I'm guessing he's going to try and pivot away to a different point because he recognizes he's been absolutely wrecked.
We are pretty major problems.
So speaking about the United States, again, yeah, I think you are very good at pulling apart, the small specific parts about, individual studies and going back and forth. Have you mentioned that conclusively every major medical association in the United States agrees upon gender-affirming care, that it's a valid form of healthcare? And
dude, so he's literally going off to a different point now. Dude, this is embarrassing. This is fucking embarrassing, dude. He's just been absolutely wrecked on that point, and then he's just pivoting off to, what about the fact that all the people in America support it?
It should be acceptable for doctors to use. And the same applies to Canada. Every major medical association in Canada strongly supports gender-affirming care.
Dude, this is really fucking snaky as well. Just presenting stuff like... So, it's like a sneaky way of trying to it's like a post-shower argument. You're basically putting this stuff in order to make yourself look better in the debate. That is crazy. Oh, look at how correct I am and what I'm saying here. For as far as I can tell, he's not done that at any point for Jesse Singal, and he certainly hasn't done it for any of the stuff that Jesse Singal was correctly arguing there.
Access to puberty blockers and hormones.
Well, I mean, first of all, that's not true because the American Academy of Pediatrics is doing a new systematic review.
It's 100% true.
What do you,
I'm sorry. The American Academy of Pediatrics, the American Medical Association, the American Psychiatric Association, the American Psychological Association, the Endocrine Society, Pediatric Endocrine Society, American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry, the National Association of Social Workers, and American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, they all have statements that are still available on their websites. Now, that could change, as you're suggesting right now. The American Academy of Pediatrics could change their stance on that, but as of right now, every major medical association in the United States agrees and strongly supports gender-affirming care.
They don't strongly support it. So they all use different language. Some of them will say, like, in the case of well-assessed youth or something like that. In the case of the AAP, they put out a 2018 policy statement where this one guy, Jason Rafferty, he wrote it. And usually when you have a statement from a medical group, you want it to be like the statement of the whole group, right? Not just one guy or like a committee. So this was an unusual case where one guy wrote it. It says at the bottom, this is his responsibility and his responsibility alone. And it's a strange statement that I think has a lot of inaccuracies.
Okay, what is this? That's not even what he's referencing. So he's literally arguing him with the... Dude, this is so obnoxious. He's arguing with him with the edit. That is outrageous. That is like outrageous conduct.
Now, I know that in your world, the CAS review has been debunked, which I just think is wrong. I've written about that. The CAS review, one of the useful things it did was look at the existing standards put out by these groups. And it basically just showed that there's not a good scientific process underlying these statements. And I think in some cases, there's a case to be made that there's been political pressure. In the case of WPATH, we know from documents that fell out of these court cases that there was political pressure. So I think you're too trusting of the medical establishment because like they're not purely scientific groups. Like some of the American Medical Association and groups like it have been against Medicare for all. They've been in favor of these ridiculous laws that make it hard for like Indian doctors to come over here and practice. So they're not right about everything.
Oh, dude, that's a great angle. Oh, God, that is actually a superb angle to take. So you take something that obviously Lance is going to not like. They don't want to let floods of Indian doctors come over here. What do you think about that, Lance? That's based.
Like I'm guessing you are for Medicare for all, right?
I think you've changed the topic like 3 times in one sentence. You're trying to just deviate away from the fact that every single...
No, dude. He is literally addressing your point you're making. Because you were saying, look, all of these medical associations support this. And the response to that is, well, they support other things that you probably disagree with. That's a direct response to what you're saying. Because you were using these organizations to say, well, they're saying it, so it must be correct. He's obviously saying, well, no, they push for things that you probably wouldn't agree with either.
In the United States agrees upon this. You can start to poke holes in that by saying that their statement isn't as strong as you feel it is, but that is just a universal fact right now. As of our recording, that every single major medical association in the United States agrees upon this. Now, if you want to talk about the CAS, if you want to talk about the CAS review, we can eventually get to that because again, I want to talk about this in terms of like I'm not an expert on this. I'm not a scientist, right? Yeah. So I have to actually look this stuff up. But this is universal as well within Canada. If you're not aware, the Canadian Pediatric Society, the Canadian Medical Association, the Canadian Psychological Association, and the Canadian Psychiatric Association all agree that, again, they support gender-affirming care, including the use of puberty blockers and hormones for youth. That's the totality of the major medical associations that would determine whether or not this should be safe for children to do.
So let's stick to the Canadian ones, which you're probably more familiar with. When you say they support it, do they support it like an informed consent model or lengthy assessment? What exactly are they in favor of?
So I wrote down a little paragraph on each one of their endorsements. So the Canadian Pediatric Society recommends gender-affirming care, including puberty blockers and hormone therapy, under informed consent models. The Canadian Medical Association...
Dude, it's just... I've got no idea why Lance... I mean, obviously he probably felt obligated because you talked so much shit about him or something. But he's clearly got, like, all these notes. If you've got, like, notes that you need to read off, you are not equipped to do a debate about this. Like, you need to internalize and know this shit to have a debate. And now all he's doing is listing off his notes that he's written down for this. It's just like, bro, you are nowhere close to being ready for this. Especially with, like, Jesse Singal, who he's literally just sat there casually fucking slamming all your points that you're making. Jesus Christ, dude. This is rough. This is a rough watch, man.
Endorses access to gender affirming.
Also, this was released on his channel 8 days ago and it got 8,100 views. So it's not even been that good for him, has it? Dude, this whole thing has not even been that beneficial for him. He's got owned for nothing.
Care and opposes bans or political interference. The Canadian Psychological Association supports affirming care and mental health support for trans youth, and the Canadian Psychiatric Association affirms that gender affirming care is evidence-based and medically appropriate.
So the first one you mentioned, is that informed consent for young
Yes,
people or for
informed
adults?
consent model.
For who? Adults or young people?
Both.
Both. Okay. So that means like if a 13-year-old comes into a clinic and wants hormones, they should just get hormones.
No, not at all.
If they sign the consent, yeah, that's what. Yeah, if they sign the consent form.
You've spoken about the DSM-5 before, right? You're aware of how the system itself works.
No, informed consent. The whole point of informed consent is there's not gatekeeping. That's what informed consent is. If you're told the risks and benefits of this treatment, you can consent to it. You can fill out a form.
Right. But in the case of you saying that, like, you could just walk into a door and walk out with puberty blockers, that's not how someone would be diagnosed with gender dysphoria.
But under the informed consent model, it doesn't matter what their diagnosis is. The point is, informed consent.
Absolutely, it does. Sorry, how do you think the DSM-5 works? Do you think that people simply walk into the clinic and they say, I like...
Bro, this is terrible. This is terrible form from Lance. This is absolutely awful form from Lance using this. And also what Jesse is saying is correct. The point of informed consent is that you're told what all the upsides and downsides are, and then you decide and say, yes, I'd like to do that, right? I think what Jesse's saying is correct here.
Girls, but I want to dress up like a boy, and then they're like, okay, here's hormones.
Do you know what informed consent means?
But no, now you're backtracking. Again, this.
Well, just tell me, yes or no. Do you know what informed consent means?
Jesse, specifically, when it comes to how they actually walk into these clinics that are treated, neither of us are doctors, right? So in what world does that work?
Do you know what informed consent means? Because this is important to the point I'm trying to make.
We've already defined informed consent.
What does it mean?
Recommends gender-affirming care, including puberty blockers and hormones therapy, under the informed consent models.
Okay, you're Googling informed consent model. What do you find?
No, I'm opening up their website.
Oh my God, dude. See, this is what I mean, dude. Exactly that. He does not know this well enough to debate this. He does not understand well enough to debate this.
I want to get to it.
Okay. You don't know, dude. Just say it's. You're not.
In 60 years,
you know a lot of.
Sorry, go ahead.
I think you don't know what informed consent means, and that's causing a roadblock in the conversation. Under an informed consent model for youth, if that's what this group supports, a 13-year-old, if they're informed of the costs of the potential harms and benefits of the treatment, a 13-year-old can go on hormones right away. That's what informed consent means in the context of transgender healthcare.
No, they would still.
And it could be you're in favor of that.
They would still need. No, Jesse, they would still need to actually be determined. Sorry, a doctor would still need to be determining whether or not that individual actually, in fact, has the 5 of the 7
no, that's
qualifications.
Gatekeeping. The whole point of informed consent is it was a response to gatekeeping, because for decades, trans adults felt like doctors were poking and prodding them and asking personal questions. Informed consent was an alternative to that, where the doctor says, here's what the hormones will do. Here are the potential downsides. Right. Sign this form and we'll give them to you. So that's why informed consent clinics are so popular, including at some of our Planned Parenthoods in the States.
But then what I don't understand what your problem is with that then.
With a 13-year-old being able to walk in and get hormones?
But they wouldn't be able to. Under informed consent models.
If under informed consent, that's what informed consent is.
Yeah. If it's an informed consent model, then that is what would happen. And I see people in chat pointing this out, right? It's like Planned Parenthood, right? Like in Planned Parenthood, I think if there's an informed consent model. Yeah, informed consent would be like you walk into a surgeon's office, you say, I want a nose job. The doctor outlines the risk, and you sign the paper and walk out with a shiny, fucked up nose. But I'm pretty sure in Planned Parenthood, there are things you can get without parental consent because they operate off an informed consent model.
In the States, we don't have that for 13-year-olds. You're saying, unless you're misunderstanding the statement, you're saying for youth, informed consent would mean that. Yeah.
But how do I make money off depressed people?
So I'm going to look this up.
Oh, dude, he's having to look up stuff.
Trans people is the same reason a bar really likes functioning alcoholics.
Thank you for the $5. Appreciate it. Oh, dude. This is tough.
Look at their website.
Yeah, sure. Also, if you drop a link in the chat, I could read the exact language.
So I guess my bigger question would be then, if every single one, again, because neither of us are doctors, but if every major medical association in both organizations agrees upon this.
I've been trying to answer your question, dude. You said every major medical association supports it, and my point is clearly, you wouldn't follow what a medical association says blindly, and you just said one of the medical associations in favor of informed consent for youth. Mm-hmm. So you're against what they say. You don't believe in informed consent for youth on this issue.
The CBS emphasizes that very young people develop different
races.
Dude,
you know that he's like sweating as well. Oh my God, man. he's like sweating, desperately trying to find the answers, searching on the internet. Oh, it's so cringe, man. Getting totally bodied by this fucking... Oh my god, man.
Chronological age, use consent to gender-affirming care, gender-affirming approach, recognizes interventions that may be social, psychological, medical. They say that puberty blockers considered safe and used when appropriately within a caption of psychological care. Decision-making and medical treatments include puberty blockers, or hormones should be private dialogue amongst youth, their providers, and their families. Yeah. So this should be a private dialogue between youth, their providers, and their families according to their model. Yeah, I'll send you this.
So just to find out a point of disagreement.
That is exactly what I agree with. Whether or not you can find, like, yes, like I've told you before, this is not my area of expertise. This is something I believe should be between, again, families, doctors, their healthcare providers. I think what you and me do, essentially, you being a journalist, me being someone who disseminates the news in an entertaining way for people to watch online, what the two of us are effectively doing is we are crafting narratives. And then one of the things that you are doing when you say that you are going to be in opposition to the majority of the scientific consensus on this, because the majority of the scientific consensus seems to agree on these facts, is that ultimately...
Well, that's also not true, because we haven't even got into like the actual systematic reviews in places like Sweden, Norway, Finland, UK. Like all of Europe has gone in a different direction. Now, I'm not saying we should favor one over... I mean, this would get very in the weeds. I'm not trying to get us in the weeds. At the very least, you have to admit that like over in Europe, in some pretty good healthcare systems, they've gotten much more conservative on these treatments. They have concerns, and those concerns are probably not made up by internet trolls, I would think.
No, I think that they are more politically motivated than they are scientifically motivated. I think that there's clearly a...
Bro, how is the NHS politically motivated on this topic? Like, I'm not saying that politics don't come into nationalised healthcare. Obviously it does. But the idea that there's some sort of politics behind the cash review because there's transphobes trying to do something is fucking ridiculous, bro.
A broad consensus amongst the scientific community on this topic, and then there are obviously going to be individual studies or people who try to...
No, there's not broad consensus amongst the scientific community at all. That's bullshit. Dude, these fucking dishonest wretches constantly do this. Constantly act like there's a scientific consensus definitively, and there's not a scientific consensus, and the whole point is saying there's a lot of problems with the science behind this.
Poke holes in it using, again, rhetorical tricks, trying to find out whether or not you understand this as a simple definition. But like I agree that, like,
well, so you're saying that, so your view is the American Medical Association, the American Academy of Pediatrics, they offer non-politicized guidance, whereas the government of Finland or the government of Norway, those are too politicized to trust.
Yes, exactly, dude, exactly. This is such a good point as well. So they're not politicized and they're just correct, but these ones are politicized and therefore incorrect.
That's the basic argument?
It's not an argument. I don't know enough about what is going on in Finland specifically, so I don't think I'd be able to speak on it, right? So, I mean, like, okay, how about this? Like, you as a person, how many articles have you written on gender-affirming care and trans people, do you think, in totality?
I mean, I've gotten more into it since after the firestorm in my Atlantic article. I had like a little bit of a, we need a better term than red pill, because it didn't make me conservative. It didn't make me in favor of the bans, but I got obsessed with these studies in a way I did for my first book, which is on non-gender stuff, where like you read about something where there's a scientific consensus and you read study after study and you're just like, these are bad studies. And to me, it's like pretty... So
yeah, I mean, I've tried to avoid the comments because it's just anti-Semitism, isn't it? But he's got a nose on him. This dude is single-handedly causing an oxygen shortage in a city. Plant more trees now. The source reminds me of a dumber, far less verbose Big Joel. Surface-level analysis that always shifts and is always said with extreme aggression and authority, despite being as shallow as a puddle. Yep.
In my first book, I wrote about something called power posing, which is when you stand like this with your arms out, and it supposedly makes you a better and more effective negotiator, and the research is pretty bad. It's like, so what? What's the harm of that? To me, if there's bad research about 14 and 15-year-olds with a lot of mental health comorbidities, going on hormones or getting surgery in some cases, that's higher stakes. And I think I got annoyed at the extent to which people were, in my view, being pretty misleading about this subject. Now, I will say I'm working on a book about this. After the book comes out, I would definitely like to move on because this is a toxic subject. But yeah, at this point, I've written a lot on it because I think it's an interesting subject where there aren't a lot of left of center journalists covering it in what I think is a respectful way, although I know you disagree with that.
Yeah, but do you have like a number? I'm just curious because like I found the one article in the Atlantic. I found 7 in the New York Mag, 3 in Medium, 2 opinion pieces in the New York Times, 3 articles in Unheard, 3 articles for Dispatch, 1 article for Spectator, and then
so New York Magazine. You're including like my interview with Laura Jane Grace against the bathroom bills. You're including anything I've written that. I mean, whatever. Yeah,
I'm just saying on the topic. I'm not saying whether or not the coverage. I'm just saying that you've probably written like 60 to 70 pieces on this, right?
Including random newsletter articles. It's probably dozens by this point. Yeah.
Okay. Then I guess for a topic that you've concentrated so much on, how many people yearly in the United States are receiving, youth are receiving puberty blockers or things like top surgery?
We don't.
Bro, so is he doing like you've written a lot about this, but it's barely affecting anyone? I mean, you can make this argument with lots of things, couldn't you? There's lots of, bad things that I've talked about, but it's only affecting a very small portion of the population. Like, what point is that? Well, yeah, obviously there's topics that are less discussed. I mean, I mean, also, does the same work on the inverse as well? Where it's like, there's like so much pro-trans stuff that is well in excess of the population rate of trans people. So what do you make of that then? Like, it just feels ridiculous to claim that there's a problem with talking about something. Just because this guy happens to be having a contradictory perspective, it's wrong that he's talked about it so much, despite it having a very low percentage of the population affected.
I don't know. I know you're going to reference a study that came out recently based on like insurance billings, but so much of it is done through private insurance. I don't think we know. I don't think this is like, when I see gender critical types, like they'll use a term like this is like gay genocide, like the gays are being genocided and turned trans. I don't go in for any of that. I think there's enough kids and the issues are interesting enough that
Bro, there could be some minority. The minority within a minority within a minority. That's like 2 people. And lefties will fucking spend loads of time talking about how terrible they've got it. But this guy talking about this topic is not allowed because not enough people are affected. It's so ridiculous.
It's a worthwhile subject for journalism. And that's what mainstream journalism has decided. Not no disrespect to you, but like the major outlets, The Economist, Reuters, The Atlantic, The New York Times, maybe, I know we've been accused of a moral panic, but I think a lot of people think it's an interesting issue, especially because so many parents are dealing with this and trying to figure out what to do.
I mean, for a topic that you've written so much about, you probably want to know how many. I
wish we had better data. Yeah.
But you don't agree with the data. I know you just referenced that study, right? Like, I'm not trying to bring this stuff up as a gotcha. It's more to understand the psychology behind this, because again, if it's something that is not occurring to a massive percentage of kids, say like 0.1% of kids are actually receiving it. Like, so for that data that we're talking about from, the Komodo Health study, it shows that in 2021, puberty blockers, 1,390 kids are on it. 2020, 1,101 kids were on it. For top surgeries, 2021, 282 kids were on it. 2020, 256 kids.
US patients aged 13 to 17 undergoing mastectomy. Bro, it's not like a lot as a percentage point per capita, but like, you're not allowed to care about this, guys. You're allowed to care about this once you reach a certain number that I decide makes it okay to care about. This is fucking crazy, dude.
Top surgeries.
I don't have better data to offer you. I'll just say intuitively, the claim that only 1,000 kids in the whole country are on puberty blockers doesn't make sense to me. In part because there's like
literally hundreds of legally mutilated children in the first world nation, and we aren't supposed to care. Yeah, and it's ridiculous. I mean, like, obviously it's wrong. Like, fucking that what's his name? Matt Walsh said a really stupid thing about it. Like, obviously don't overstate it, but it's reasonable to have some level of concern about this, particularly when there's a group of people and a group of like advocates that strongly push the idea that there's nothing to see here, nothing to worry about, and you should stop caring about it.
But again, I don't have like data to.
Well, there's way more kids who are on hormone replacement therapy, but there's I'd say a smaller amount of kids who are on puberty blockers, both because of the controversy surrounding it and the fact that this is something that's supposed to be temporary, right? Like, my understanding is you go on puberty blockers for a short period of time before you're put onto hormone replacement therapy.
Yeah. Yeah, and a lot of kids might, I didn't mean to talk over you, but a lot of kids might end up at a clinic at an age where it's too late for puberty blockers to do much, which is what makes this like such a heartbreaking controversy. Is there's a subset of kids who...
Lance's advocacy for trans people is just as effective as his advocacy for uncovering of the indigenous mass graves.
Thank you.
Emoji. Roots.
Thank you, Squirrel Age, for the 333.
Have this limited window to pass. I mean, it's a bigger deal for male to female transitioners because like testosterone is a more powerful hormone. But that's what I find compelling about the arguments for early medical intervention. That it's to some trans people, not all of them, it's a pretty big deal to pass and to be able to just live as a woman. And if they don't go on blockers, they probably won't get that. So that time element, I think, really makes this more difficult. And look, if I had a kid facing these issues who really wanted to transition, I don't know what the hell I would do because I don't trust the medical establishment on this. But I also don't trust the people who say these treatments should be banned or that like there's no such thing as a trans kid, which is another common line. So I think all I've been trying to argue is that it's complicated. I think from your point of view, it's like, why the focus on this? Why the negative stories? But I think...
Yeah, I guess I try to understand your psychology here because honestly, if you've written, close to 70 articles on this and you've dedicated so much of your career to focusing on this subject, I assume because like, I'm saying this in good faith. This is not because you're not particularly obsessed with, say, discussing trans people or, trying to profit off this topic specifically because it's been lucrative. Then my other assertion would have to be that you...
Bro, this is so snaky to get this sort of he's just getting these little comments in, isn't he? These little snipes. He's such a wretch. Dude, never doubt Stylo, okay? He was correct. He's correct, okay? This guy is a total piece of shit. I'm fully on board with it, okay? Total piece of shit. Desperately trying to paint this guy's coverage in a certain way, in a very dishonest, snaky, strategic way. It's disgusting. Like, he's obviously interested in it and just so happens to make money from it. Fair enough. But he's trying to paint it like he's just doing it for some sort of... Bro, in fact, a little bit anti-Semitic if you ask me. A little bit anti-Semitic. Oh, the Jews just wanted to make some money, is he, lads? I mean, bro, that's essentially what he's doing to Jesse here. Obviously, I don't truly believe that. But, it's obviously unreasonable to paint him as some sort of, like, purely money-motivated person when clearly he's got an interest and a passion in it that he just so happens to be able to monetize as a journalist.
You are doing this specifically because you are genuinely concerned about what happens if there are negative outcomes from children who receive gender-affirming care and the potential side effects from that. Is that fair?
I think so. I think I'm also just like drawn to controversy. So again, some of the subjects in my book, it was like the implicit association test, power posing, this Army PTSD program that in the States we spent like $300 million on. For all of those, you could say how many people does this affect in the grand scheme of things. And I'd say not every journalist writes, like what's the most pressing issue right now is probably what's going on in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. We're not talking about that. Or like there's all these hotspots, there's all this stuff we know nothing about. That's just not really how journalists decide what to cover, in part because when we find a niche, now you mentioned profiting off it. I think the kinds of study critiques I do are very dry and boring, but useful. And I think the profit maximizing way to go about this is to just be transphobic, to go the sort of libs of TikTok route or the OK groomer route. And I think it's really important to point out that this is a...
Yeah, dude, that's actually a really good point, isn't it? Like, if he was just a money-motivated guy, he could literally... And principleless money-motivated guy, which is what Lance is trying to paint him as, he could just fucking spit out of it. He could just do videos reacting to trans people going, look how ugly they are. Do you know what I mean? Like, obviously, his content is not centered around making money. He happens to make money from something he's interested in. But he could make way more money if he just went down the obvious, like, shitting on trans people route.
Medical controversy. And if I question the medical protocols in place or the American medical...
Well, yeah, dude. This video on the ex-Linus Tech Tips employee, Emily Young, is doing quite well on the second channel, I must say. So we need some more of that. I mean, this is also good trans content as well, But obviously DK's not going to have an opportunity to go and look at find some choice images, shall we say.
Medical Association. That is not denying that trans people exist or that they deserve access to quality healthcare. And it's been annoying because I think that's a really important point. And it's like both sides disagree with that. Like you have the left saying, no, that means you hate trans people. You want them to die. You have the right saying, like, why are you acknowledging trans people exist at all? And I would... I host a podcast, I express opinions, but I do think just like being a science journalist who tries to get at the truth is important here. But
but ultimately, those lanes are already pretty well occupied by people who, aren't cowardly about their beliefs. They wear their hearts on their chests and they will say things like Michael Knowles does, right? That, we want to eradicate transgenderism from society. Yeah. I think that you've found something that's a little bit more unique and that you can actually approach these topics from a standpoint where people on the right could then use the information that you put out there because it's not coming from a right wing or a far right voice. It's coming from someone who identifies as a center or a center.
Bro, what is this take? Don't say the truth about stuff because the right might take it and represent it. Dude, this is fucking crazy. Guys, don't speak the truth on a matter because imagine what the right wing might do with it.
Or leftist, right? So that would be a unique lane in terms of if that was in fact something that you were doing for profitability.
Yeah, right. So the idea is that I'm seeking to have my ideas laundered and used by like Trump or whatever.
Not seeking to. I'm saying that would be something that not a lot of other people approach it from that angle specifically, right? Now, I'm not making that accusation, but I'm saying then if that's not the case, then the other answer is that this is something that obviously outside of the controversy and outside of the fact that it's been a highly discussed topic, your interest primarily is obviously to make sure that, again, children who are receiving forms of gender affirming care, whether they be, surgical procedures, stuff of that nature, are not making life-changing decisions.
Sorry, I got distracted there.
Used by like Trump or whatever.
Not seeking to. I'm saying that would be something that not a lot of other people approach it from that angle specifically, right? Now, I'm not making that accusation, but I'm saying then if that's not the case, then the other answer is that this is something that obviously outside of the controversy and
well then, okay, so you're saying it's not intentional. What the fuck business? He can't control that, can he? It's so unreasonable. What the fuck, man? God, this has been the progressive brain rot for years now. Ooh, careful about speaking the truth about something. You never know what right-wingers might do with that information. And he is making that accusation, but he's trying to do it. He's basically like prodding out. He's basically like, throwing all these traps down and hoping that Jesse stands in them. That's what he's doing here.
outside of the fact that it's been a highly discussed topic, your interest primarily is obviously to make sure that, again, children who are receiving forms of gender affirming care, whether they be, surgical procedures, stuff of that nature, are not making life-changing decisions or decisions that effectively could have a negative impact upon their life without having a full conversation about the potential risks, right? Is that fair?
I don't look at it that way. I look at it as like, I want people to have the best, most accurate information available, especially parents. I don't really think of my work as like, this will prevent bad outcomes, because I think there's so much other information out there.
But okay, so your concern is less about the children and more on the parents of the children then, so that the parents have access to information on, again, potentially.
Well, so in the States, it's...
Well, everything has got like a sort of coded barb in it. Do you know what I mean? It's like, he's always putting out these little comments that are designed to just make him look bad. Oh, so you care more about the parents of the children. God, dude, he is like... I remember this when I've spoken to him before about stuff. That is exactly his like strategy. These little barbs that he's trying to get you with.
It is, in most cases, it's the parents making the decision, which gets hairy in its own way. I mean, I don't know. I think it's interesting. I do, like I said,
This is the inevitable conclusion of the Chud dunking industrial complex. You don't actually care about having a conversation or understanding their position or even maybe conceding a point. You just care about looking as good as you possibly can and getting as many dunks in as you can on your opponent. He's done it so often, it's ridiculous.
Wearing a little bit thin on it because it's a tough thing to write about, and I think people would be surprised how many very angry emails I get from the right. But yeah, I don't know.
I believe that dude. He gets squeezed between both because he's not extreme enough for the right. So he just gets squeezed by the righties for being too trans positive. And then the lefties don't like him because he's not trans positive enough.
Okay, that's wonderful. But how do I make money off depressed people?
This is why these people had to go in the 1940s, and the reason they have to go in 2025. Admit it, I was right.
I disavow.
Now back to my painting.
I disavow an Austrian painter, but thank you nonetheless. The very generous 33. Thank you.
Stand by most of my work. I think there's some stuff I got wrong, especially early on, like 80% desistance. It's just I didn't understand the full complexity of that literature. And in the Atlantic, I think I was too deferential to some trans rights organizations, and journalists always need to be careful about that. But yeah, I think I don't know. I think I'm okay with what I'm doing.
Can I ask then why it is that you've never tackled like cosmetic surgery of youth in the U.S.?
Oh, like a 14-year-old getting a boob job?
Well, yeah, because I wanted to look that up just out of curiosity. Like the stats on that in 2020, there was like 229,740 cosmetic procedures on teenagers, including 3,233 breast augmentations. It seems to be something in which it's happening at a much larger and more frequent rate.
Well, teenagers, is that teenagers like 18, or are we talking about like minors? I mean, what age are we talking about there? I don't know the fucking stats.
In the U.S., in terms of teenagers getting, surgeries and forms of gender-affirming care that effectively.
Extreme enough for the right, and by extreme you mean not giving experimental drugs to children. No, I mean not extreme enough for the right as in he's not saying the kind of stuff that fucking Michael Knowles or whatever says about it. That's what I mean. Like, he's obviously... Like, listen, you're fucking delusional if you don't think that, like, this guy... Like, obviously this guy is getting pressure from the right because he is too... From some of those perspectives, he's too soft on this topic.
Could have negative outcomes. And sometimes do
Wait, sorry, a girl getting a boob job you're calling as gender-affirming care?
Yeah, I'd say philosophically, obviously I agree with you probably, not probably, it's not medically the same as having gender dysphoria and then trying to get treated for gender dysphoria as a trans person. I'm not saying that at all. What I am saying though, that is...
Well, the difference as well is that like a breast augmentation, I mean, I would disagree with the breast augmentation for anyone under 18, that's ridiculous. But regardless, it's not argued that it's medically necessary. Whereas with gender affirming care, the argument is, from progressives particularly, this is medically necessary. So it's not the same on that front either. It's an elective surgery. So there are obviously differences between these things. And I don't really understand why it is that we're talking about this topic. So this topic that I'm claiming by squeezing into a box really hard is the same. You should talk about that as well.
Why haven't I mean, to me, that's it's such a no-brainer that's a bad idea for a girl. Now, I would want to dig into those stats and know how many of those are purely cosmetic. I think in some cases, like, cosmetic overlaps with functional stuff, and there might be something wrong. But
there's breast reduction surgeries that are being done for medical reasons to both men and women, right? But this is a massive thing in the United States. Like, there's articles I could pull from 2011 that had 8,000 women aged 13 to 19 were undergoing breast augmentation, and that's something that's like, it's not even FDA approved. You're not supposed to get breast implants if you're under 18 years old. So it's
okay, 18 and younger. Well, okay, what are the actual ages then? Like, I mean, it's probably inadvisable for an 18-year-old to do it, but they're an 18-year-old. They can do what they want at the end of the day as an adult. But, like, what are the actual ages that we're talking about here?
Something that people are having to do off-label and are being done on very, very large scales and rates. And it's not something that is in any way talked about in the same way the discussion surrounding trans people is, and the focus on trans people is.
I think partly it's because of that, the old journalism expression, dog bites man. Like, dog bites man is not an interesting story. Like, to me, it's so obvious that a teenage girl who hasn't yet fully developed, if this is what's happening, shouldn't get a breast job. I mean, if I would, I don't know. I always get like
the thing is, the other problem with this analysis here as well, I don't think, except for Stylo maybe Stylo might be in this camp, I don't think there's like a large group of advocates online that are clamoring and pushing
that's wonderful.
For girls to get breast implants, right? Or justifying it in some way. Do you know what I mean?
But your uniform is in the Royal Mail. Wink, wink.
Thank you for the 333. Thank you. There's not like big advocacy groups that are like, give 16-year-old breast implants now. Like, people are just generally going, oh, that sounds wrong and I don't like it, right? Whereas the trans stuff, there's large groups of vocal people that are saying, this is good, we should do this, you know? Like, where are the people that are clamoring for breast implants for teenagers? I mean, it just doesn't happen. It's not a thing, you know? And plus, I don't know the ins and outs of the reasoning, because someone mentioned in chat, like, one breast. Like, there could be some development issue where someone's got only one breast. And is that like, that's a different kettle of fish to just, I want bigger breasts.
Right, but if that's the way you feel on that, wouldn't that be something that you should then be bringing more attention to, even if it isn't topical? Or does that go back to the same thing with Canadian mining companies in the Congo? It's not something you think would get...
To be fair to Stylo, yes, he was saying the opposite. He disagrees. He thinks that teenagers that have got back problems from breasts that are too large should be forced to keep them. That's his take.
It's like, so if a big chunk of the liberal establishment tomorrow came out and said, we think it's really important these girls have breast implants, and it became a fairly, I mean, it sounds like it is a common practice, although I'm guessing it's more in conservative places.
Yes.
I just think if I wrote that, everyone would be like, yeah, this is obviously wrong. This shouldn't happen. The question of should there be like legislation or whatever, like I wouldn't be opposed to that. It's hard for me to imagine a situation where a 16-year-old girl would do that. I think her parents are really failing in that situation if they're approving it. Although that depends on the age.
Again, this is something that is happening at a much higher rate, right? I hadn't even got into
we don't know. We don't know.
Rhinoplasties,
I don't think we know
right?
this.
Well, we do know the rates of plastic surgery on teens, right? Because the stats are publicly available. So for rhinoplasty, for example, that's 44,686 teenagers got rhinoplasties in 2020. But that's an overwhelming amount of people who are getting potentially, life-changing surgery. There's eyelid surgery.
I don't buy that comparison as much because I think
life-changing surgery or getting a nose job. I mean, dude, it's obviously very different. Getting a nose job, right, which is supposed to improve the physical aesthetic appearance of your nose, is very different to getting your breast chopped off. Your nose still functions. It's just that certain parts of it are taken out to look better. I probably would be against, kids getting this or whatever, like the general rule. But it's ridiculous to act like having a nose job is comparable to having your mastectomy. That's ridiculous.
I think rhinoplasty and double mastectomy.
Like your nose still works, it just looks different because bone's been carved out of it. Whereas in the other case, your breast tissue has been removed and you can never get that back. You can obviously get breast implants maybe, but like your breasts will never function as they were biologically intended to.
I mean, like rhinoplasty is less intensive, but if someone floated like I don't know, if someone was like, no kid under 16 should get this, I would not be outraged at that at all.
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
I just think like teenagers.
Yeah, people are not going to be outraged if you say no child under 16 should get this fucking plastic surgery. But some people are outraged if you say no kid under 16 should get puberty blockers or hormones or physical transformation of the body to trans stuff.
Chud, I am not a fan of the nose jobs. Young makes them harder to spot out in public. We need to know the genetics. We can't have these Jewesses putting on camouflage.
Thank you for the 333. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for that, Austrian painter. Very, very based.
Why not focus on it then? If this is something that you could say was in a comparable category that affects way more teenagers than gender-affirming care, which again, when you look at it, we're talking about hundreds of kids on puberty blockers and then maybe it was over 1,000.
No, obviously, I'm being a bit silly because Dilo is saying weird shit, but breast reductions are obviously in some cases necessary in order to help prevent back pain and shit like that, right? So, I mean, obviously in some cases, it could be literally medically necessary to prevent other issues because the breasts are so heavy because they're oversized for whatever reason.
Like 1,100 kids on puberty blockers, but then for kids getting, gender affirming care related surgeries, those numbers are they're
new goal. Yeah, I'll be here for another hour. I think I'll put the gaming stream back because I want to finish watching this. Sorry guys, too much talking. Too much bloody talking, guys.
Practically non-existent in relation to the fact that there's like 72 million kids in the United States.
I mean, if we're comparing something like a nose job for a 16-year-old to having her breast removed, I just think one of those is a much more serious procedure than the other.
Yes, exactly.
But that would be a personal decision, right? Not a medical one.
No, you're losing the ability to breastfeed. You're losing some degree of sexual.
Bro, that is fucking... Dude, that is a given. How could you possibly argue the toss on that, bro? How could you possibly argue the toss on that point?
Functions.
But that can happen with breast implants as well.
Yeah, I mean, breast implants. Sorry.
No, I added that afterwards. I was previously speaking about, but like, so if
it sounds like you're saying teenagers, maybe if they're going to get a permanent medical procedure, we need to be careful about that, and like they shouldn't be rushed into it.
Well, they're not rushed into it. First off, is the thing, though, right? That's a myth that kids are going through some kind of revolving door, and I still think that it's a ridiculous assertion because no medical practitioner is going to tell you that a kid walks in and then they're given puberty blockers and then walks right out of the.
Well, but what do you think about the story I reported for The Economist where a kid walked right in and got puberty blockers at Children's Hospital of Los Angeles? You think she's lying, or the medical records are lying?
No, I'm saying if it's true that those are rare cases.
If it's true.
This is not the
They're
majority
rare
of the
cases.
cases, though, right?
So you just said it doesn't happen. Then I said it happened. You said yes, but it doesn't happen a lot. But you don't know.
Bro, dude. That is like a sort of alternative to the it doesn't happening, and if it is a good thing. It's not happening. Oh, it is happening sometime. Dude, oh my god, this is giving me flashbacks, dude. Because I always thought that under 18 you couldn't get like a mastectomy. And then there were these cases of it happening, and progressives were like, oh, well, it's happening rarely, but it's really needed in those cases. Well, hang on a minute. I thought it wasn't happening, and it is happening apparently. That seems pretty bad.
No, because Reuters.
Oh,
Reuters
I don't know, because you're talking about an anecdote that I'm not familiar with. So obviously I have no prior knowledge to this. But if it is true, I'm saying that this is not indicative of the vast majority of people's experiences. Again, similar to how writing about detransitioning and focusing on that. Sorry?
Are you against a 13-year-old getting puberty blockers their first appointment?
It's not really what I personally feel, because I'm not an expert on this topic. It's what the current DSM-5 requirements are, right?
Oh my god, dude. So fucking slippery, dude. What a slippery little fucker. Doesn't want to answer it.
So it's one of those things where, like, for children, we have to basically follow the majority consensus of the medical community in all fields. Yep. I would apply this to anything else, by the way. I would apply this to kids who have appendicitis, right? Can I make recommendations as to whether or not your kid should be getting, the surgery to take a part of their body out of them if it's been infected and inflamed that could potentially save them? I mean, I could politicize that by saying it's mutilation. You're going to be mutilating your child's body by taking out their appendix, and then that is going to remove a part of them forever. But ultimately, again, this is something where I would have to defer to the majority consensus of the scientific community.
Bro, that's a terrible comparison, because it is well documented over a long period of time, appendicitis, what it is, the fact that, the appendix is not like necessary, it can be removed with pretty much no issues whatsoever, well fucking documented surgical procedure. Whereas this new stuff is like, it's mental health, it's not as like physiological that you can see and know what the problem is and know what to do, and it's all very newfangled, all this stuff we're trying to do with it. Yeah, a definitive, urgent, life-threatening condition that we've got a well-documented, well-researched knowledge about how to deal with it, versus something which is mental, so it's not as clear and easy to see what it is and to physiologically document it, and then it's new treatment that we don't really have good information and studies on how it works. Totally different fucking situation.
Yeah, the problem just for years now has been this, like, I think because of the bubbles, we inhabit different realities, and there's probably areas where your reality is more correct than mine. But on this one, where you just sort of blithely say, this isn't how it worked. Like the biggest investigation in the States of how gender clinics operate was Reuters in, I think, 2022. And they called up, I forget how many, 8 or 10 of the biggest multidisciplinary gender clinics. And they all said, we'll give puberty blockers on the first session. Now, they said in cases where we feel comfortable with it, but that's like a serious liberalization of the so-called Dutch protocol, where you jump through some hoops. You even go on blockers, and maybe that's too many hoops, but
sorry, your assertion is that the majority of kids who walk into clinics are given puberty blockers on the first session.
I never said them.
Bro, look how this guy is such a liar. He never said that. He never fucking said that. He literally didn't say that at any point. He's literally lying about what he's saying. He's saying it now.
I never said the majority. You said this is something that doesn't happen. And I said, according to the best investigation we have, it routinely happens, because all these clinics say, yes, we do that sometimes.
So it routinely happens, so not the majority, but it can happen and has happened before.
With some regularity at the biggest multidisciplinary gender clinics. Yeah. Like their regular practices, a kid shows up for the first appointment, they send them out with
that's not how we, so this is not how we talk about any other topic in relation to children's healthcare, right? Like I wouldn't specifically be like, there are cases probably in which doctors are prescribing medications like Adderall for children, which could be dangerous, and they shouldn't have done that, and they had negative outcomes. I'm sure that happens.
You're saying we're talking
about, but I'd say that they're just...
Well, yeah, that's true. Yes, I'm sure that happens, yes. Yeah, I mean, it isn't like, bro, Adderall diagnosis and like, Adderall, there is a big discussion and conversation about the rate at which Adderall is diagnosed for children, and it is a controversy, and some people don't like it and have criticism of it.
There's literally millions of children, like 72 million in the United States, right? There's going to be obviously examples of doctors who are not following the proper ethical protocol. I don't have control over that or whether or not that happens. Yeah. But that doesn't then change whether or not people should have access to gender-affirming care or healthcare in general based on bad practitioners.
No, nor, and I haven't argued otherwise. But you're saying there hasn't been a debate over whether kids are being overprescribed Adderall? Hasn't that been a massive debate?
Yes. Me and Jesse Singal. Boom! Yeah, let's go! Yes, Jesse!
I never said that there hasn't been a debate. I'm saying that there could be cases. There could be cases in which children are prescribed Adderall when they didn't need to be prescribed Adderall, right? And in
which
that case,
led to a massive debate in the States, not just Adderall, but everything from
Yes, exactly. This led to a massive controversy and discourse. I mean, I'm in the UK, and even I know about it. I know about this fucking thing because I hear on the, you just hear about it. But yes, a massive controversy that kids are just getting overprescribed this medication because of lazy family doctors who can't be fucked to do that. It's like, give them some Adderall. That'll sort them out,
Like antipsychotics, anti-anxiety. Like we have a huge debates. This is the only pediatric medical issue where, for a while, there wasn't debate. Like I sort of feel like your side lost and the debate's broken out into the open. But I think your point, you're making the opposite.
You keep saying sides. I'm not entirely sure what you mean. Do you mean leftists? Is that it? Just like because
no. I assume you don't consider us to be in agreement about this stuff.
But what stuff?
You think these treatments? You think gender medicine?
Oh, about the different care? Yeah, of course not. No, we're diametrically opposed on this. I personally
because
am on the side of the. Well, no, I'm on the side of the majority of the scientific consensus on this. There's really no point in me being a non-scientist coming forward to you and saying, like, again, this is one of the points of you trying to say that you don't even know what informed consent means. Because I'm not a doctor, this is not my area of expertise. This is something that I would defer to, again, the majority of the scientific community. If the majority of the scientific community...
As long as it wasn't a Swedish doctor, a Finnish doctor, a Norwegian doctor, in which case you would disagree.
Once again, anecdotes and isolated examples, though, right? Like, again, if it's something...
No. The point is you're saying the medical community is absolute in America on this, and they're correct. But then you're saying, well, what about these countries? And you're saying, well, they're doing it for political reasons. Bro, this guy's all over the place.
They changed their national policy.
Right, but there can be moments in time where there's going to be a single doctor who comes forward and says, hey, by the way, I'm a whistleblower. I have to say this. We've been giving kids puberty blockers way too fast. Of course that's going to happen. Just billions of humans on the planet, right? In the case of should we...
Okay, this is so dishonest. It's not just one doctor coming forward. Countries are totally shifting the way that they're dealing with this because there's now... information that's come out that suggests that the studies and evidence about this are not very good, and we need to fucking come at it again and make sure that we're getting it right because the consequences of getting it wrong are going to be disastrous going forward. Exactly. This houses anecdotes. The NHS as well. It's so stupid, man.
We restrict the ability for people to have access to healthcare, which in my opinion is restricting their ability to have human rights. I believe that a trans person should have access to healthcare just as a cis person should. So in that case, I would, again, because it's not my area of expertise, defer to the majority consensus of the scientific community on that one. In Canada, it is every major medical association as it is in the United States. Now, as you said, that could change. You could start to have a reversal of this in the same way you're seeing in the United Kingdom, right? Where now even the bathroom debate has been reignited. I'm not saying that political movements aren't going to push for an agenda in this regard.
Yeah, I guess I just don't understand when you exhibit deference to the experts and when you don't, because it sounds like it's sort of a continentally based. So like North American experts, whatever they say, you believe. European experts, no, not so much.
But when you keep bringing up European experts, right? The vast majority. You make an assertion that the vast majority of
So who is this? This is one person. What has this got to do? This is so wretched the way he's using these little screenshots to try and make him look bad. Like, the point he's making is there's places in Europe that obviously disagree, and you're not giving any credence to them, but you're giving full credence to this. This is completely irrelevant. This is European society. I can't even see it. I can't see it to the thing.
Experts on the topic, including the entirety of the medical community in Europe, disagrees with the Canadian and the American medical associations.
Well, there's a part of what makes this complicated is like American healthcare sucks and is politicized. So right now, the position of the American government and the healthcare experts in it is that these treatments are bad. We can set that aside. My point is Finland, Sweden, Norway, the UK all did what in other situations would be considered like normal review processes, pretty in-depth. And none of them came to the conclusion like these treatments are horrible, but they all came to the conclusion that the evidence really sucks. And they all really made their policies in those countries more conservative. And when you say you don't trust their judgment, but you do trust the American Medical Association's judgment, I just don't get why.
So I'm saying I trust the broad consensus of the scientific community, which as of now, again, recording this, still, I don't see an overwhelming amount of the scientific community on this topic. I see isolated examples and politicized movements within a series of countries that you're now...
Politicized movements within a series of countries, bro. This is such bullshit, dude. This is such fucking nonsense. It's not a politicized movement. It is the medical associations looking at the information evidence and going, this doesn't actually seem to stack up. Let's have another look at this. It's so wretched. It's such a dishonest way of just dismissing the stuff that disagrees with you.
Now trying to use as a justification for saying if it's happening there, it could happen here or it will happen here. It's only a matter of time. And I'm not going to disagree with the fact that, especially under Trump and his current regime, that there's obviously going to be a pushback, and there already is, towards restricting the rights of access to healthcare for children. What they require is, again, people to cherry pick data and people to cherry pick examples or to cherry pick studies.
Bro, the problem is as well, it's like, it's bullshit. There's never been a broad consensus medically on this, because there's not been enough data to back up a broad consensus. It's always been kind of haphazardly stitched together. And there's this idea that, like, what was the thing that they said? That GLAD thing that was going about is settled science or something. It's like, never been settled science. It's always been very cutting edge, like, information based on very new studies and new information that aren't fucking good enough. And that was the whole point of the Cass review, is going, shit, this stuff isn't nearly as good as people say it is. Let's try and figure this out. Yes, it's always been a very contentious topic, like pediatric care for trans stuff. It's never been a clear-cut thing.
And then use those as a justification for, again, doing political action against a persecuted and minority group, in the same way that this was happening to, say, gay people prior to trans people. And one of the reasons why I think, again, what you do is particularly insidious is because you are giving them the ability to say that this is not just coming from the right. There are authors, say, like Jesse Singal, who are capable of demonstrating that, hey, there are cracks in the so-called, general consensus. There are opportunities for people to find, disagreements.
Your problem is with a journalist saying there's cracks in a consensus because you're so confident that consensus is correct, basically. That's what you're saying? Or
no, more just just asking questions of it all, right? Like why can't we just ask questions? To me, I think if you had a genuine curiosity on this, unless you want to push a political agenda, then the breadth of information, including the overwhelming amount of studies on this topic, and yes, there are isolated studies that you can pull out. As I've debated Tim Pool on this topic. I've spoken to other people. They always have this. The Swedish study actually disagrees with you. I can pull up this Dutch study that I think was misinterpreted. But if it's the overwhelming amount of studies or the meta-analysis of studies.
I'm just tuning in. Surely chat has made millions of jokes about the nose of the dude on the left. Yes, DK in particular is making some good comments, should we say.
Or the general consensus of the scientific community still at this point, then
but that's not
it's
true.
like
but what you're saying
you could pull up isolated
true.
examples of other countries where things are more draconian, right? Like Uganda. If I went to Uganda, there would be very, very harsh penalties for either being a homosexual or being a bisexual or being a pansexual. That to me is not going to be reflective of whether or not we should be advocating for people's healthcare here domestically in Canada. But I think we should obviously listen to the international community when it comes to their scientific conclusions on this topic.
Okay, but you're just saying in these particular 4 cases of Finland, Norway, Sweden, the UK, these 4 happen to be politicized, so we can safely either disregard them or seriously discount them.
I'm not disregarding them, but I'm saying but why are you using that as a way to discount your own country's scientific consensus on this?
My own country's scientific consensus of this as of a few weeks ago is the HHS report, which is the whole point is this stuff gets politicized.
That was a Trump report.
I mean that
Okay, but you're not answering. Okay, so see, you just avoided the question right there, Jesse, because so the majority of the medical communities, every major medical association in the United States agrees on this topic, and yet you're like, well, no, we're moving in an opposite direction. Here's a report coming out. Is that the one that was commissioned or overseen by Robert F. Kennedy? Is that the same one?
His HHS, yeah. But I think you're missing my point.
Him as
my
a
point
serious
is
no, dude, it's just so dishonest. He's not saying that this, dude. He is saying it's getting politicized in the US. And he's trying to present it like, oh, you think this RFK guy is correct? Is it clearly just trying to fucking seek for whatever donkey he can get here? It's fucking wretched, dude. This guy's so dishonest. He's obviously not saying that.
Person, doesn't he believe that microplastics cause trans people? Like, doesn't he have a bunch of...
RFK Jr. is a crank. But the point I'm trying to get at here is...
Then how is that a legitimate example of this? Like, how's that a valid thing to bring up? When I'm saying in your own country, the majority consensus is centered
The point he's making is you're going off the medical consensus, but it gets politicized. So if Trump tomorrow found a way to get it so that all of these medical organizations said that we need to ban transition for everyone, including adults, would you agree with that because it's the medical consensus? It's very obvious the point he's trying to make, that you shouldn't just blindly go off of what one country's fucking political organization, what if their fucking medical organization is saying, because it gets politicized and that can get changed. And then if you want to be consistent, you're forced to say, well, I've got to agree with that because all the major medical orgs are saying it. It's so obvious the point that he's trying to make is. Lance is so fucking wretched and dishonest, and he just lies and lies and lies
around this.
When you say majority consensus, you're talking about a handful of statements that have been put out by different organizations. Those statements have actual content. It's not like a golden plate handed down by God. So what you do if you're a journalist or if you're a scientist is you read those statements and you evaluate them and you see if they make sense. And one thing you do is you see if the citations point to studies defending the claim being made. And the folks who have looked at that question of if these guidelines are good, these were the CAS folks, although it's technically an independent team separate from CAS. They don't think the guidelines are good. And I think what happens sometimes, and we've seen this happen in the past, is that doctors get very excited about a new treatment and they're trying to do the right thing. They're trying to help kids or save kids' lives or prevent suicides. And they get out over their skis and they make claims they can't defend. So when, Joanna Olsen Kennedy, she's the one who got sued, whose story I wrote about for The Economist, when she says she has never given puberty blockers to a kid for whom it was the wrong choice. So she's suggesting she has an 100% batting average. I think the right thing for a journalist or someone who actually cares about trans people to do is be like, could that really be true that this doctor is so infallible that in the hundreds of times she's given these treatments, she's never been wrong? And I think you're granting boundless deference to these American and Canadian professional groups, while I don't know what your stance is on the European efforts, which I think were more scientific, but I guess that's the problem here.
So you believe the CAS review was more scientific, in essence?
Then what? Than
the Canadian and American counterparts and consensus on this topic.
But you're lumping. Okay, so for example, the one I know the most about is the American Academy of Pediatrics. That was just like, that was a guy. It was a guy. Do I think a guy's views on this should be weighed more heavily than a handful of York University systematic reviews? No, of course not. You do? You think Jason Rafferty gets to beat all these independent systematic reviews?
But when you say a guy, because again, you'll then point to an anecdote of someone where it's like, here's an example of a clinic.
I'm describing the statement you're defending. It was written by a guy named Jason Rafferty, who I think was a psychiatric resident at the time. He was a guy. That's what it says on the paper. You're saying that you trust that one guy more than the teams that did these systematic reviews at, I always mix up University of York and York University, whichever the British one is. But in this case, is it not reflective of the statement by the organization itself, or it doesn't speak for it? His statement is independent of the organization, or it is representative of the organization? There's a weird line at the bottom that says, I can pull it up just to make sure I'm being accurate about this. I also got to go in like 10 minutes. We said we were doing an hour. Rafferty's statement.
Oh, shit. All right. Well, then link that thing.
Also, the thing is, he's pulling information from like, when is this from exactly? 2018 position. When is this? Dude, I hate this. This is so fucking shitty that he's doing this post hoc shower shit of throwing up these things to try and disprove him. Like, it doesn't matter because he's getting fucking railed for doing badly anyway. But it's like, let the debate stand as it is. Why are you interjecting all of these sources that are backing only you up? That is fucking outrageous behavior.
I want to talk to you about one or two quick things that we haven't actually brought up.
Yeah, let me just read this one sentence and then I'll move on. Policy statements. Dr. Rafferty conceptualized the statement, drafted the initial manuscript, reviewed and revised the manuscript, approved the final manuscript as submitted, and agrees to be accountable for all aspects of the work. It's a very strange statement. And that's why I would question why you would say that we should pay more, view this as more believable than a handful of independently conducted systematic reviews.
Simply because, again, it's something.
It's a guy, and there's no process.
Right, but you just don't like the way that it's worded.
Say again?
But you just don't like the.
Well, no, it's also,
because it sounds strange.
But there's also there's Oh man, it would take an hour for us to talk about the differences between systematic reviews and policy statements. Ask whatever you want to ask, because we don't have that much time left.
Okay. I just want to quickly see if this was something you still believe, but in a debate that you had with Jingle Science Lab on July 1st, 2020, you said, and I'm going to quote you here, gender dysphoria is listed in the DSM. Maybe it shouldn't be, but as of now, gender dysphoria itself is a mental illness. Maybe we'll look back and say that it shouldn't have been.
Oh, I know what this clip is. Oh, dude. This is content right here. This is pure content right here.
Still stand by that statement.
Yeah, the DSM-5 lists gender dysphoria as a mental illness. Yeah, they changed it from gender identity disorder to gender dysphoria, partly because that would make it sound less stigmatizing or whatever. But it's listed alongside all the Now
it's not listed as a mental illness though. I mean, to do that is something that right wingers do. I think specifically to be able to, again, like you just mentioned, stigmatize trans people, but it's not listed as a mental illness. That's a factually incorrect statement to make. It's not. And the DSM. So in the DSM-5, gender dysphoria is listed as a mental disorder that can arise as a result of extreme stress or distress that comes from...
Mental disorder? Yeah. That means mental illness, you fucking retard. That means the same thing. Mental disorder and mental illness means the same thing. It's used interchangeably.
One's own gender identity not lining up with what they were.
You just said it's listed as a mental disorder.
No. See, the wording here is very tricky and important, and so it can be diagnosed as a mental disorder, gender dysphoria specifically. And this is not done to stigmatize trans people. It specifically does not list trans people or non-binary people as having a mental illness.
Sorry, hold on. Why is it stigmatizing to have a mental illness?
It's stigmatizing to say that trans people or being trans by definition is itself just a mental illness. This is what right wingers are consistently doing.
Bro, this guy's so raped, it's unbelievable. He's actually trying to argue that it's a mental disorder, not a mental illness, when that term is used interchangeably and it means the same thing functionally. Fucking hell, dude. This is outrageous.
No, gender...
Tim Pool has himself tweeted that out.
But being trans is not the same as having gender dysphoria anyway.
It's like, not, but that's why it's important. Yeah, but it's important to actually identify these things, whether or not they're correct. And again, it lists experiencing gender dysphoria as a mental disorder. So that's different than your statement, both statements that you made so far.
So I feel like you told me, do you stand by this? I said yes. And then you said, no, you're wrong. And then you read me something that just echoed back what I just said. I might need more caffeine, but you got to explain this to me.
So
you're saying it's...
So first off, it's not mental illness. It's a mental disorder, right? We're distinguishing between those two. And then
what is it distinguishing there? It means the same thing. What do you mean it's the same thing, bro?
And secondly, it's not by definition, if you are trans or if you are non-binary, you have a mental disorder either. Because that's not what the DSM... No, I know, but that's what the implication of that sentence and you then doubling down on it means.
You asked if gender dysphoria in the DSM-5...
I didn't ask anything. I read you a quote of yourself that you had said out loud. And I said, you still stand by that, even though it's factually incorrect.
It's factually incorrect that the DSM-5 has a condition called gender dysphoria?
See, now you're changing the topic. It's factually incorrect that they list it as a mental illness. That is not correct.
You're saying it's a mental disorder, not a mental illness.
No, I'm not saying generally that it's a mental disorder. I'm saying if you experience gender dysphoria, specifically the DSM-5 says that can be classified as a mental disorder. If you experience gender dysphoria, extreme distress and duress. Yeah.
I don't understand. Sorry, it sounds like we're both saying that being trans is one thing.
Keep saying that we're saying the same thing, but we're not. One obviously is being utilized by the right to stigmatize trans people. This is one of the reasons why people like Tim Pool will frequently make statements where they say being trans is a mental illness. It's actually in the DSM-5. It says you're mentally ill and stuff like that because they both.
Yeah, okay, we'll go and speak to Tim Pool about that. That's obviously not what he's saying. He's saying that gender dysphoria is listed as a mental disorder in the DSM-5, which is just a statement of factual record. That's it. You know, obviously you can take that and stigmatize it if you want, I guess. But, like, he's not doing that. He's just stating a fact of the matter.
Think that having a mental illness is something worth of stigmatization. And in addition to that, they want to associate that directly with trans people. So I think furthering that idea, especially coming from, again, someone like you, who is not someone who identifies as a right-winger, a far-right extremist, or any of that kind of stuff, it then gives ammunition. Tim Pool can say, well, yeah, Jesse Singal said here that the DSM-5 says it's a mental illness.
What do you think the DSM-5 says gender dysphoria is?
Can we pull up the DSM-5 and just read the actual definitions?
I'm extremely... You seem like a friendly guy interpersonally, but I'm very confused right now because I feel like you're yelling at me and I don't... Well, not yelling. You're not yelling at me. Your tone is totally fine. But the
I was
DSM,
like, I don't believe I've yelled once this entire time. But anyways, I'm going to be. I want to pull it up here so we don't get anything mixed up. So it's on table 2. The DSM-5 criteria for gender dysphoria are marked incongruence between one's experienced and expressed gender and natal gender of at least 6 months in duration, as manifested by at least 2 of the following: A marked incongruence between one's experienced and expressed gender, primary and or secondary.
Okay, what has this got to do with the...
sex characteristics, or in young adolescents, the anticipated secondary sex characteristics.
Bro, he's good at just reading a bunch of shit off to make it sound like he's winning something, isn't he? Like, what the fuck, dude?
6B, a strong desire to be rid of one's primary and or secondary sex characteristics because of a marked incongruence with one's experienced and expressed gender, or in young adolescents, or a desire to prevent the development of the anticipated secondary sex characteristics. C, a strong desire for the primary and secondary sex characteristics of the other gender.
What the
D,
fuck,
a strong desire to be
dude?
the other gender, or some affirmative gender different from one's designated gender. E, a strong desire to be treated as the other gender, or some alternative gender different from one's designed gender. And then F, the final one, sorry, this is taking a long time, a strong conviction that one's typical feelings and reactions to other gender or some alternative gender differ
That feeling when you try to explain why fucking a literal man isn't gay.
from one's designated gender. So this condition is associated with clinically significant distress or impairment in social, occupational, or other important areas of functioning.
So what you just read, those are the criteria for what?
For gender dysphoria.
And what is gender dysphoria?
Did you want me to reread the entire thing? The gender dysphoria is what they determine. Again, gender dysphoria is what they determine. Okay, to be.
Yeah, it's a mental disorder because it's in the DSM-5. The DSM-5 is a list of different mental disorders, which is interchangeable with mental illness.
But how do I make money off depressed people?
Actual debate, bro crying when the person he has been shadowboxing gives a bit of pushback.
Thank you for the $5, Silent but Dudley. Thank you.
B, someone who is experiencing distress, duress as a result of having.
No, I know, but what does it reflect that it's listed in the DSM-5? Like, what is
if you experience gender dysphoria, then that is what is classified as a mental disorder, because they're doing that not to stigmatize it, but in order to allow doctors for the ability for them to diagnose it properly, to be able to help you get medical attention. So that distinction is very important. And you keep going back to, I think we're saying the same thing. We're not. The term mental illness is never used at all in the DSM-5 in relation to trans people. And also, being trans or being non-binary is not itself a mental disorder. Experiencing gender dysphoria.
Okay. Do you think gender dysphoria is listed in the DSM-5 as a mental disorder?
Experiencing gender dysphoria is.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, I think we.
What the fuck, dude? Dude, this is classic, like, this kind of debate shit. You agree, but you'll slightly change it to make it sound like, oh no, it's actually this that I think. When you were just agreeing. Yes, you would just agree with that. But you can't possibly act like they've said something you agree with. So you need to twist it and act like you're saying something different, but you're not. You're saying the same thing.
Dysphoria is listed in the DSM-5 as a mental disorder.
Experiencing gender dysphoria is.
Well, yeah, obviously, you need to experience it for you to be suffering from that mental disorder, wouldn't you? Like, bro, what? Of course, that's how it works. You experience it, and therefore you've got the disorder. What the fuck, dude?
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, I think we agree, unless I'm confused. Well, but what's the difference between a mental disorder and a mental illness? And we're talking about the symptoms. We're not talking about being trans. I'm also not even defending. I'm just saying it's in the DSM, and you won't. So
you're saying that it doesn't matter to you if you call it a mental illness, even though the DSM-5 doesn't call it a mental illness, because you don't see it's a distinction without a difference to you between the two.
The DSM-5 is a list of mental health diagnoses or mental disorders, and one of them is gender dysphoria. In the ICD, they branched it out and they gave it its own category, so it's no longer considered a form of mental disorder. I also I just got to say, as someone with a family history of a fair amount of mental illness and my own struggles. Like this idea that let's say gender dysphoria is a mental illness, like that doesn't mean people who have it are any less worthy of everything they deserve in life. I think it's this weird backwards.
No one is implying that. I mean,
but how do I make?
No, you're saying it's stigmatizing.
People?
Experiencing schizophrenia isn't the same as having schizophrenia. Semantics strong. Dysphoria.
Thank you for the $5. Thank you for the $5. Thank you. What Lance is trying to do, by the way, it's very obvious, the fucking stupid game he's trying to play. He's taken someone like Tim Pool, who will say that being trans is a mental illness, and he's trying to hang that around Jesse Singal's neck, when that isn't even what Jesse Singal has ever said. He's never said that being trans is a mental illness. He's saying gender dysphoria is a mental disorder listed in the DSM-5. So he can't easily do it, so he's got to try and spin it and twist it to somehow link what he's saying to Tim Pool, and that's where it all falls apart, because he's not said that, you know?
That's
No,
a very,
I don't-
very
I guess I
underhanded tactic to try and get away from the fact that you were incorrect about
No,
this.
I'm not talking about
It's not about stigmatizing people with mental illness, but it is, again, being utilized and weaponized by the right, to the far right in this regard, to try and stigmatize trans people. And this is yet another example where I think that they can use quotes that you've said or statements you've made. And again, it's not coming from a right-winger. It's coming from liberal journalist Jesse Singal.
You know, Hitler was in favor of big public works projects like highways, like the Autobahn, and like really investing in public infrastructure. So I guess that's bad now because Hitler, I mean, it's a silly type of argument because it can be true that like I said something, I said there's controversy on this issue, which there is. Whatever else you think about it, there is controversy.
Let's go, Hitler.
And a Republican
reference.
says there's controversy. Like I don't know what to tell you. I'm not going to lie and say there's not controversy because a Republican might not use it. In the same way, I'm not going to say public works projects are bad because Hitler, the worst guy who ever lived, was in favor of them.
So that's not at all what
Of course, Jesse bringing up Hitler there makes perfect sense.
I accuse you of. But I mean, you are aware that a lot of right-wingers actually have used your own work when they have attempted to both pass bills Reuters journalism, Times journalism, and my journalism regularly get cited by folks writing legal documents saying that this is controversial or the evidence is suspect. My view is... I've got numerous cases of federal executive branch reports that have used and cited your work, state legislative materials that have cited and used your work, amicus briefs
that's because there's
there's
a medical controversy here. And I think you're
no, but they're specifically cited your work to justify their right-wing political agendas, right? And so for me personally, if I was a journalist or an author and I was writing and it was appearing frequently and being used to go after the very people that I purport to care about, then I would feel that there was something that I was either missing or I had really fucked up, right, dude? Like, honestly, if you're like, I care about trans people, I don't want them to suffer, and then it turns out all of these right-wingers who are trying to pass laws or all of these cases in which they're trying to restrict the rights of trans people continuously cite you because, again, that way it gives them the validity of not being able to say, this is not just coming from the right.
Bro, this is so wretched, man. So, it's so transparent, man. He's desperately trying to pin, in some way, the right on him. The right are the bad guys, and they're doing terrible things, and that's on you. And he's tried multiple times to pin it on him. Obviously, completely unreasonably. He's literally just done it with a stupid point about stigmatizing, and now he's trying to do it by saying, well, they're referencing your work. What's that got to do with him? He's writing what I think are reasonable fact-based analyses of things. If people want to use that, he's not got no control over that.
Sure, there are some right-wing and people who are considered to be right-wing, but there's also Jesse. He's a liberal author for the Atlantic.
Well, and the New Yorker and Reuters and the Economist.
Absolutely, even more fuel right there.
So as journalists, what should we do? Should we just say that this isn't controversial and the evidence is super good? Because
I wouldn't say, I'm not speaking to all journalists, I'm speaking to you specifically, that obviously doesn't that at all worry you? That again.
Well, okay, what is he supposed to do? What is he supposed to do about this exactly? Like, what? It's like, the only solution seems to be to not speak the truth then, and just to, not speak the truth about a topic you're interested in.
And if your work is being cited by some of the worst individuals that pass laws that are going to restrict the rights of the very people you pretend to care about, then at its core, haven't you fucked up?
So I take it you've written about the, I will answer that question, but I want to throw one thing back at you. I take it you've talked on your show about the mass graves in Canada of Indigenous children.
Yes.
Haven't some churches been burned down, like in the outrage over that?
Multiple churches were burned down,
yeah. Is that
did you watch the...
Bro, let's go! Dude! Yes, this is a great point to go at, because this is a big source of issue, isn't it? Dude, you remember that debate? God, that was awful. When that fucking retard that he was tied to the hip to was trying to argue that, like, oh, maybe... I think he was arguing, like, some of those churches burned down on their own or something. Ridiculous.
The Lawrence Southern saga that I had, is that why you're invoking this out of curiosity?
No, I literally picked a Canadian example at random. But do you feel responsibility?
Are you bringing this up because I'm Indigenous? Is that the reason?
Are you Indigenous?
Yeah, my mother is.
What on earth, dude? Are you bringing this up because I'm Indigenous? And he's like, are you? I didn't even know. Chef's kiss. Bro, so much chef's kiss content today. It's too good, man. That's unbelievable that he genuinely tried to pull the "are you bringing that up because I'm Indigenous" card.
Is that why you're invoking this out of curiosity?
No, I literally picked a Canadian example at random. But do you feel responsibility?
Are you bringing this up because I'm Indigenous? Is that the reason?
Are you Indigenous?
Yeah, my mother is.
Okay, but do you feel responsible for causing those churches to be burned down?
For having spoken on that topic?
Yeah.
No, I don't.
Yeah, because you were telling the truth, or you're telling your understanding of the truth, and some idiots took it too far. That's how life works. And as a journalist, you really have a it's a big part of our job description to say what we think is true and to not worry too much about what some asshole is going to do with it. Nothing about the controversy over these treatments or the fact that we don't really know what the long-term outcomes are. None of that justifies hating trans people or the more draconian bans. Like I wish we didn't live in such a fucked up schizophrenic country, because we're headed for a landscape where like half the states will ban these treatments and half the states will just go the other way and liberalize it even further. But I think you're.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it turned out that there weren't these mass graves, and it was actually like I have some bullshit with it. I can't remember, but anyway, dude, like obviously, I think the point he's making is, I mean, I think Lance probably was saying what he thought was true. I don't think he was like, you know, he probably did think it was true. There was some kind of commentary about it that seemed to suggest that maybe there was some truth to it. But yeah, I mean, obviously it didn't turn out to be true. But the point he's making is, and this is what we were saying earlier, right? Like, what, you shouldn't say what you think is true because you're worried about someone going and doing something bad off the back of it. Like, no, you say what you think is true, and if someone does something of it, that's on their fucking shoulders and that's on their lookout, you know?
Your claim that if you make a true claim and then someone somewhere does something on the basis of it, that's your fault. I just don't buy that. I think the church example is what I'm getting at.
But so for your example to work, I would have had to have been first lying about the fact that there were, children who were killed.
So I'm lying.
At the residential schools. Well, there are examples. There are times when you've actually publicly stated, like you tweeted out, "I done goofed. I got the data wrong. I actually misinterpreted a study." Like you.
What? How is that lying, you fucking retard? That's not lying. That's making a mistake and getting something wrong and admitting to fault. Whoa, what on earth, dude? How is that lying? That's not lying. That is openly admitting that you've misinterpreted and gotten something wrong and correcting the record. How is that a lie?
You publicly said that before.
So that was lying?
So whether you were doing it because you wanted to, whether you were doing it because, again, you misinterpreted the data, the end results will be the same.
Dude,
right?
A lie is saying something that you know to be untrue intentionally. Right? You can't mistakenly lie. You can't mistakenly tell a lie because you'll be saying what you think is the truth at a given time, and then maybe you find out more information, it turns out you're wrong, and then you admit to it.
Right? At the end of the day.
But
if I pull up here, okay, maybe specific examples is more fair, right? So I don't put words in your mouth. But the article you wrote specifically stating that most people don't understand the rates of which the study that shows that I think it's 80% or 70%. Sorry, I want to pull up the study itself. And I know you've not have a lot of time left.
Yeah, even a lie by omission. The point is you're intentionally omitting information in order to present a narrative, and the inclusion of that information, which is reasonable to include, would debunk what you're saying, and you know it exists. But you can't like you have there has to be intent there. That's the whole point of a lie. There's the intent that makes it a lie. Otherwise, you're just mistaken.
Okay. The study that shows researchers found puberty blockers and hormones didn't improve trans kids' mental health at their clinic, and then they published a study claiming the opposite. So this is a critique of Tordov et al. 2022, up on your Substack, correct?
Yep.
So in this study, and please correct me if I'm wrong, maybe I'm also misinterpreting the data, but I have the table in front of me. They have what is a baseline, a 3-month, a 6-month, and a 12-month category, where they're obviously interviewing adolescents who both are put on puberty blockers and gender-affirming hormones, and then adolescents who are put on none. And your assertion is that the difference between the moderate to severe depression, which in the baseline is 57%, and the 12-month period is 56%, shows little to no change, effectively, and that it's disingenuous for them to have said that the idea of using puberty blockers or gender-affirming care has benefits as a result, because it just shows such a small amount of change to their moderate to severe depression. Is that fair?
Moderate to severe depression goes from, 59% to what?
So there's 57% at the baseline, and then it goes in 12 months to 56%. And so that 1% change is really what I think in this article you've kind of grasped onto to say that this is a disingenuous article, disingenuous study, because it's not really showing a market improvement, right? Which, 57 to 56%, I'll grant you, does not seem like an overwhelmingly huge change after 12 months of being on puberty blockers and gender-affirming care.
Yeah. So
Right.
you're saying sorry, what are you saying I'm lying about or misinterpreting?
Well, you're misrepresenting what the study's supposed to indicate, because there's a baseline between people who are on puberty blockers and gender affirming hormones, and then there's people who are on nothing. And that,
Dude, even from a like this is way too much like in the weeds. Even from just a debate optics perspective, it's like very hard to follow what he's saying here. Like, he could be completely right that Jesse's lying, say, which I don't think he is necessarily, but like, you know, it's like, what are you even talking about it, dude? You got some fucking table up, you're talking about some percentages or something? Like, dude, what are you even on about at this point?
that the people who are on nothing, it goes from 59% for moderate to severe depression to 83% after the 12
Moderate to
months.
severe depression, none at baseline is 59%. Then at none, there's 5 kids left. The sample's gone from 54 kids to 5 kids. Do you think?
Right, and in both directions, the sample size has actually increased for the kids who are on puberty blockers. It goes from 4 to 32.
Well, because kids shift over time, but can you like you said 59% to 83%? I'll include this table in the show notes.
Yeah, please.
You know that you can't say compare percentages of a group of 54 kids to a group of 5 kids.
I agree. And my point, so my point here is not at all that there are problems with their methodology, or that, again, I would also like to know a lot more information about the study. I'd like to know, how did you determine, for example, what you consider to be severe depression? Was it a ranking scale based on a other, test that had been done in the past, something to that effect? So I'm not here to argue that in the 12-month period, the 5 kids who reported 80...
Bro, he does look like a Simpsons character. He's so fucking yellow. He looks like he's just walked off fucking Springfield. What the fuck, dude?
percent, right, is in some way that this is ironclad. This shows without a shadow of a doubt, kids who are not put on puberty blockers and hormones have much worse outcomes. But that is what the data is supposed to indicate from the study, right? Is that if you are on a baseline, and you even say this a couple paragraphs down, that, hey, if the study is trying to show ultimately that if you're on a baseline, even if it doesn't improve your quality of life, that's better than not being on it at all. But that's unfair, essentially, right?
Well, but we don't know that from this study, because basically all the kids who hadn't yet started hormones dropped out of the study, and we don't know what happened to them. Like, so that's why we only have 6 kids left in the no hormones cohort 12 months out. So all this means is like we don't know. And what happened was they initially put out press releases saying kids got better. After I pointed out to them, they corrected their own press releases. So they seem to be agreeing with me that they overclaimed.
So in this regard, this is not the way that you would treat the potential positive outcomes for other medications, right? There's a lot of other medications where the improvement rate, say for someone like put on SSRIs or antidepressants.
Bro, I mean, I'm not even really following this at this point, but I mean, I'm just a bit like, okay, you really, like, after the point you made earlier, you really think you're going to out-debate fucking this guy on some study like he's written about. It's just so fucking, it's like hubris.
May simply stabilize them, and then people who are not on a medication at all have much worse outcomes. That can absolutely be the case, right? Which is what I believe was the purpose behind this, as flawed as it could be. But to obfuscate that factor, to not point out that is essentially a very strong comparison between the two in terms of the kids who are not on anything, for example, would have higher rates. Here's where I think things get a little bit more complicated, though, because you only focused on the 57% to the 56%, right? Which is, again, a 1 percentage point, which you say is statistically insignificant. In the moderate to severe anxiety, at the baseline, it's 57%. That goes down to 51%. So
what's the sample size what's the sample size?
It's 4 when it starts at the baseline, and so more kids then join in every other group. At 3 months, 23 join. At 6 months, 28 join, and at 12 months, 29 join. So
I know, but these are statistically meaningless comparisons, because if you go from 4 kids to 29 kids, you can't just do a percentage comparison. Then that's like the whole problem with this study. This is like one of the worst studies published on the subject in terms of all the problems with it, their inability to answer basic follow.
So yeah. The sample size is low. Dude, I'm a bit fucking confused. I'm just going to believe what Jesse Singal says here. I'm trying to engage with it a bit, man. But dude, this has been quite a long debate, and I'm just a bit like, I want to play Resident Evil 2. I'll try and fucking lock in and just understand this, though.
Follow-up question: meaningless comparisons, because if you go from 4 kids to 29 kids, you can't just do a percentage comparison. Then that's like the whole problem with this study.
Oh, I see. Right. So the problem with the study is the sample size is so low that you can't say go from 4 to 29 and make any sort of assertions about what that looks like, because the sample size is way too small and you can't really get good data off of that, basically.
this is like one of the worst studies published on the subject in terms of all the problems with it, their inability to answer basic follow-up questions. I consulted a statistician who said this is not the right method to use. So I would just argue this isn't the hill to die on, but it doesn't really matter what
it's not a hill I'm choosing to die on. In fact, there's parts of the article that you wrote that I would actually agree with. It's the fact that, again, I think you're trying to well, no, I think you're trying to cherry pick specific information because it all obviously is going to benefit or help your narrative, right? And in the case of, your statements saying that the kids who got worse as a result of not being on medication, you say, well, like, yeah, there could be other examples of medications where we do this and that could be beneficial. There's a breadth of medications in which we do that. And that's actually, a large part of so much of how we treat kids with ADHD, antipsychotics, antibiotics, SSRIs, antidepressants.
So my response to this would be that for years, a lot of advocates for youth gender medicine were saying that puberty blockers will make kids feel better, not that it will stabilize them. So if you look at the research protocol, there's this $10 million study that's a lot of controversy in the States, led by Joanna Olson Kennedy. That's the same woman I wrote about in The Economist when she got sued. She hypothesized in her research protocol, puberty blockers will improve kids' mental health. So to me, if a scientist says we think it's going to improve mental health, it's definitely fair game to point out when it doesn't. Now,
right, yeah. I get it, right. So, okay. I see.
But the point I was getting at, and I think I'm being transparent here, is...
But in this case, it does. Even though I agree with you, you can't compare 4 kids to 36 kids and accurately say this study is indicative of the totality of this topic. But in this specific study, even flawed, it's incorrect to state that stabilizing a child rather than simply improving their quality of life, and then kids that are on nothing becoming decidedly, effectively way worse.
But we don't know that happened because the vast majority of the kids.
So that's
bro, dude. You can't say, like, it's useless. It's like it's a worthless study. It's not good. It's not good for any. You can talk about within the study this happened, and that's cool, I guess. But you can't broaden that out beyond that to make any conclusions across the broad breadth of medicine off the back of it. You need to do another study with more people. You can't just go off of this.
Should be pointed out, not that it invalidates the very concept of being on puberty blockers or gender affirming hormones itself could potentially make kids not spiral into more depression or not spiral into more suicidality, because that would be a benefit then, right? Wouldn't you agree if that was the case between those two?
Of course, but this is such a weak study. We don't know what happened to the kids because they all, like, so many of them dropped out. So I think if you look at this table, I think most folks, and I'm not particularly quantitatively challenged, but these are like pretty basic issues. I think when you lose that much of your sample, you can't really say anything about how these kids were doing 12 months out. You also can't compare the kids who took hormones to the kids who didn't without controlling for the potential differences between them, because the kids who aren't on hormones might not be on hormones because they have worse mental health and need to be stabilized first. So I think this is a really bad study, but I'm
bad study. But I wanted to use an example of exactly why I think that specifically cherry picking elements of it, while also, like, it would be fine if you just pointed out that those specific things of the study were themselves incorrect, but then why not go one step further and say that, like, now there's multiple studies that overwhelmingly demonstrate that children who are on puberty blockers or put on hormones who are gender dysphoric have amazing outcomes. There's Green and Al.
That would be lying on my part to say that.
Green and Al 2021 sample size 11,914 13 to 24-year-olds showed depression lowered 27%, 39% under 18, suicidality changed negative.
That was Jack Turbin's study.
This is Green. Lowered 26 overall, 38 under 18. There's the 2023 study, Chen, that when it had 315 kids, they lowered 1.47 a year on the depression scale, which again is fantastic. DeVries now is the older one. Sorry?
1.47 out of how many?
I have to open up the specific studies.
Okay, so you said you said 1.47, which is fantastic, without knowing what scale you're referencing.
See, you're doing the exact same thing you were doing before, where it's like you have to discount the totality of the study by cherry picking a thing where it's like, see, Lance, you didn't actually know this one thing, so you're a fool. And it's like,
yeah, obviously you are just looking at the headlines. Like, he's probably found something where it's like, look at all this stuff that proves it. But there's obviously, with studies, there are details. There could be one detail that you don't understand that can completely shift how relevant or, useful that study is. That's how fucking science works. Yes, exactly. Oh, there's a study here that 95% of people that took puberty blockers were really fucking happy. Right, well, it's 10 people. So I mean, I don't know how that really works. It's fucking 90% of people, and it's fucking 10 people, which is not able to broaden out towards the population because it's a small amount of people. And so knowing the amount of people is important, or, you know, whatever. I mean, I don't know what he's talking about here, but obviously, yeah, there's obviously going to be details which are critical, which could massively shift the relevancy or how appropriate it is. And Lance doesn't know it because he hasn't read into it.
That's why I would myself admit both that yes, I am a fool, but also that's why I say I'd have to defer to the broad consensus of the scientific community. And the broad consensus of the scientific
So the thing is,
Why does Lance look like a cartoon character?
We've been talking about this. Thank you, Mr. Potato Head, for the Prime sub. So it's funny, isn't it? So it's like he's doing this thing where he doesn't know the studies well enough, and his basic defense strategy when that gets pointed out is, but look at what the medical consensus is here. And then Jesse's response is, what about the medical consensus in these European countries or in the UK? Oh, that's politicized. Ignore that. So he's basically his entire point is propped up on this one thrust of like a thing of like, oh, well, the American and Canadian Association say this, when it is very contentious and everyone else is trying to say, well, no, there's a problem here, problem there, you know? It's such a dishonest fucking thing, and clearly he doesn't have the fucking knowledge to do it. He's gone to the debate anyway, and he's just using this very weak rhetorical strategy of like, well, I'll just say that the medical consensus says this. But that gets picked apart as well.
Community on this topic, right? Because I'm not a scientist and I'm not a data analyst, Jesse. Yeah. So that's why I'm like, why don't we defer to the fact that, again, every single major medical association in Canada agrees upon this topic, rather than going, well, Lance, you don't understand how the study works. Lance,
well, you're bringing up the studies. You're the one bringing up these studies, dude. It's so obnoxious. You're bringing up the studies. You are bringing up the studies. You're the one bringing it into the conversation without knowing what they are.
You don't understand how this one element works. That'd be really easy to pick holes. If you were to tell me, Lance, explain to me what exactly the plus minus change of this particular volume of children means, I'm going to get that wrong because, again, I'm not a data analyst or the scientist making the study, right? I have to reflexively be like, but it does seem, if you were to have a curiosity on this topic and not want to push an agenda, that this is overwhelming in terms of the amount of evidence that comes out.
But the single best way we have to make the argument you're making is known as a systematic review, and all the systematic reviews say that these studies are quite weak and very prone to bias. So I just don't know how, as a science journalist, I'm supposed to ignore that fact and just list off
So if the
studies.
sentence you just said was incorrect, if there are systematic reviews that contest that, which I'm going to have to, I know you're wanting to go, but if I could bring that up and send you a link of a systematic review that actually contests directly what you just said, would you revert your position on this?
If on top of the 4 or 5 that say there's not evidence, there was one that says there is evidence.
You asked for a systematic review. Systematic reviews could be comprehensive, correct? It's going to include multiple.
If it's well conducted.
Okay, so if we can find one and I can send that to you, would you change your position on this topic?
I would read it. I know there's one conducted by a team, I think, in Texas that claimed that the evidence was good, but it all depends on, in much the same way, I don't really care what the AMA says until I've dug into it and read what it says. Like, the systematic reviews have to be conducted well. But yeah, if there's a systematic review, I would say that it's losing significantly to all the systematic reviews saying we don't know about these treatments. But yeah, that if it's well conducted, that would nudge my views in your direction for sure. Okay.
The other question I would have then is for preventative or like stabilizing, or what do you call it? Maintenance?
Dude, Jesse is obviously like, he's being way too Lance has been such a dishonest hack throughout this entire debate. It's kind of a shame that he's being so reasonable, but I get it. But it's like, dude, oh my god, bro.
Evidence-based medications that you would be taking for a prolonged period of time in order to try and stabilize children. Once again, it's something that you've only focused on when it's related to trans people. Whereas, again, there's a lot of other topics where we do this, right? Like antibiotics, which affects millions of kids. ADHD medication, which again affects millions. Antipsychotics, which are hundreds of thousands.
These are all good examples of big medical controversies that a lot of journalists have written about. I agree.
Well, why isn't that your primary focus when it affects way more children? And it happens to be medications that they have to take for prolonged periods of time that have very negative outcomes. Like, why would you focus primarily on medications children take that only affect a couple hundred to potentially 1,000 children a year when a lot of these other topics affect millions?
1,000. Yeah, sure. I don't buy the 1,000 estimate. Because those are all...
What? Dude. Bro, this is like, why aren't you talking about the starving kids in Africa argument for fucking trans issues? Well, if that's the logic, why talk about trans people ever? Who fucking cares? They're 1% of the fucking population or whatever. Dude, this is such an obnoxious point.
Have been written about a ton, like antibiotic resistance, whether we're prescribing too much ADHD medication. I think in some cases there's interesting parallels to this debate, especially with things like this is far from the only situation where sometimes a kid walks into a doctor's office and is medicated right away. That's a broader problem. So in my book, I'm trying to point out this isn't its own controversy, but it gets to sort of more structural problems with the American medical system. Before I do have
Why don't you just focus on something else, for the love of God? This makes us look terrible.
to go before we go, just to maybe encourage other listeners to do the same thing. What was our agreement? Was it Palestinian Children's Relief Fund a grand?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay, yeah. I had to lure. I enjoyed this conversation despite our disagreement, but I did lure you here by saying we would both donate to that cause, which I think we're both very happy to do. I'm
Dude, Jesse Singal is coming out against Israel based.
happy to talk again at some point. But
Would you be comfortable with donating it to the UNRWA?
I ran the 5K and I raised thousands of dollars for them a few years ago. I think Palestinian Children's Relief Fund, I'm more confident in their administration that it'll go straight to like the neediest cases. So that's my preference.
Well, yeah, you did. I actually didn't even know that you had written as a call to bringing me on the show until someone pointed it out that you had actually... were you tweeting or skeeting on the Blue Sky related to this topic?
I think I tweeted and I think I X'd and I skeeted. I don't remember.
Okay.
But it was probably something I was going to do anyway. I did it earlier this summer, but I think it's important to have these conversations out in the open, and I appreciate they did it.
Well, thank you for having me, and thank you for answering a lot of my difficult questions, Jesse.
It was a pleasure. I will stop
Jesse's
recording.
so nice, man.
Okay, so it'll
The
send
recording
me,
has stopped.
And sorry, I was supposed to be my friends for dinner in DC 15 minutes ago. If you could send me your half when you get a chance,
Email?
It'll or Google Drive or whatever. But yeah, I'm happy to talk more about this at some point. I think my parting words offline, Mike, would just be like the question of who you defer to and who you're skeptical of. I don't think you're consistent about it, but I think you probably think the same thing about me. But I'm glad we had.
I think if you're a person who claims to be like a person of science, I think we both do, right? Like I love science. I think science is awesome, and I love the scientific method, and
I love science, except when it says that trans kids shouldn't be stuffed full of hormones, and I bloody hate it.
Inquiry. I think that why would you you're effectively making in the trans debate the same debate that anti-climate scientists make for the 3%, when it's like there's a 97% consensus amongst the scientific community that climate change is real, anthropomorphic climate change, but then why focus on the 3? Then and
well,
why
I just don't think if you read more of my stuff, you'll see I think a lot of these studies are just there's a lot of terrible studies, and I wrote about terrible studies way before I wrote about trans terrible studies.
There's terrible studies on climate science, but then that's 3%. Like why focus on it?
Yeah, I get what you're saying.
Oh, it got cut off. No, there was more. No.
0.5 became non-binary.
No! Okay, anyway, dude. Any more funny comments? Don't tell me you've gone and brigaded, guys. When you try and employ internet debate bro tactics against a person... I'm not going to read that one.
Okay,
I know that's one of you.
But how do I make money off depressed people?
He loves SOYANS.
I love science, guys. Science. Science is so based, isn't it? Dude, people are not happy with this. People have said this was a slaughter. Torn to shreds by a hungover single. Dude, that is crazy. That is mental. Okay, there's one agreeing there. This got to be embarrassing. Mental illness and mental disorder is used interchangeably to refer to the same ailment. Yep. Dude, this one, fuck it, look. Good on you for posting this, despite having every single talking point of yours completely refuted. That was fun anyway, I enjoyed that. I knew that would be fun. Well, to be honest, it did drag a bit towards the end, but it does tend to happen with these long debates, so it is what it is. Anyway, guys, I'm late for my gaming stream again.